G'day, folks. Welcome to Faction Focus Nighthaunt. It is the coach here, and I'm here with an episode that has been long requested from you guys. You've been busting my chops. You're like, where is the Nighthaunt? Where is the Nighthaunt? Where is the Nighthaunt? We finally scheduled it. There's a White Dwarf Battalion coming. Good timing. I have two amazing Nighthaunt players here, people who have done exceptionally well with this faction, and I'm really excited to unpack this book. First off, I'm going to introduce Ash McEwan. Ash McEwan is a Masters level player. He is somebody who has run Nighthaunt very well, Master of Clan Filth himself. Ash is drinking the finest of kombuchas?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. How's everyone going? Doing well? I wouldn't call myself the Master of Clan Filth. That'd be Matt or Dan for sure. But I'll say I'm one of the members. Let's go with that.
Look, it's your video. I reckon you claim it right now, and then they can jump on the stream and they can rebuttal. But for anyone who doesn't know who you are you, Ash?
Yeah, so Ash McEwan, I've been involved in the Age of Sigmar scene since its inception. I've made a couple of appearances on your show here, Mr. Coach, but I've also been involved in some of Shadowhammer, a couple of episodes of Mortally Wounded as well. So you might have heard of me from there.
And more importantly, you've also played on Warhammer television. Let's not skip that one.
Well, yeah, that's true. That was back in the Iron Jaws days, back in the Wild West. Yeah, so I've played on Warhammer Live as well. So that was super cool. Yeah, that's kind of me. I've been kind of collecting a new army each year for the last 4 years to sort of get one of each of the Grand Alliance going. So now I've kind of settled into that. I've got one of each Grand Alliance and just picking what I want to take with me wherever I want to go.
And clearly Nighthaunt's the best one, which is why you're here today.
Damn straight.
To the stage left or my right, however it looks on your screen, we have the father of lies himself, the lead MC when it comes to the Dwellers Below. It is a man who has been playing Warhammer since he came out of the womb. Nick, say hello to... Is this your debut?
No, I think I was on the TO special with Clint.
You were on the TO special. That's right. Memorable. No, it was actually a really good one.
Dry but informative. No, it was, yeah, as you said, I've been playing Warhammer, a mix of sort of 6th ed, 7th ed, 8th ed, Age of Sigmar since, 2006, I think I worked out, 2005, 2006. So quite a large period of my life. But yeah, I've been playing Nighthaunt since the book came out last year. Was it last year? Yeah.
About
8 months ago now.
It feels like a long time ago, though.
Yeah, so just kind of on and off, sort of mixed them up. I've played them as Legion, played them with like a Legion's list of Heavy Grimghast and Nagash. I've played them as a Legion of Grief. I've played them as Nighthaunt. So I just kind of mix it up. But they're my sort of the main army that I've used for the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, and you really came out of the blocks and you did incredibly well with them. So I think a lot of people didn't have them on the radar. And then you two guys really burst out the scene early in the year, and you claimed some skulls and you drank the blood of your enemies. So what better way to unpack the competitiveness that is Nighthaunt? So glad to have you guys both. So let's get into the meat. You guys have been playing for the last, say, 6 to 12 months for Nighthaunt, maybe some longer. Bit of maybe a high level overview. Let's say I'm going to receive this box on Christmas. My mum's bought it for me. Happy days. Ash, who are the Nighthaunt? Who are these spooky ghosts?
Yeah, so the Nighthaunt Legions, they kind of emerged as a part of the Necroquake. So when Nagash had his plan with the Black Pyramid in Nagash's arm, he sort of set that into action, and it was foiled a little bit by the cheeky Skaven of Clanesh. And as a result, the magic sort of rolled out across the world, and it awakened a lot of the undead that Nagash hadn't intended on awakening. And part of that was the Nighthaunt Legion. Now, of course, Nagash is the ruler of all of undead, so he had to take control of this situation. So he chose a new Mortarch, Lady Olinda, the Mortarch of Grief, and got her to rally the troops around her, basically sort of get them into a bit more of a focused army, with some of his plans involving the Storm Vaults. Basically, use them as the knife head of that assault on on the city of Lethis to unleash Catacross from the Storm Vault underneath Lethis. So yeah,
amazing. I mean, they came out with the Soul Wars box. They came out probably at the very start of AOS 2. And certainly that narrative really evolved with the Nighthaunt. More from just, if you're an OG Warhammer player, you might recognize the Spirit Host, the Banshee, the Khan Wraith. There was a couple of those older style models, and they've really kind of blown this out with a new range, new rules, more than just, I remember James Mabry running Nighthaunt, maybe CanCon 18, and it was like 3 or 4 different unit choices. So this range has really exploded, and it's a great range.
Yeah.
So I guess, Nick, what attracted you to Nighthaunt? You've come back into Age of Sigmar and you've picked this up for the first time. What of all the factions drew you to Nighthaunt?
Yeah, I think we sort of came back to Age of Sigmar just over 18 months ago, a sort of group of us, and that was with the sort of start of Age of Sigmar 2.0, and that was when they released that Nighthaunt and the Stormcast box set, the Soul Wars box. So for me, I was kind of on the lookout for a new army already. I'd been using my Seraphon, but they were, as described by some people, literally just an 8th Ed army ported over to Age of Sigmar. They were still on their square bases and stuff. So I'd been using them, so I decided to just grab the Nighthaunt there in the new Soul Wars box. Just really like the models, like the aesthetic. I've always liked Death. Always had a Death army. Tomb Kings were my jam for a very long time. But obviously they're not in AOS anymore. So yeah, just the models, and they didn't look too strong as far as lists went when they dropped. I think the Stormcasts were definitely sort of a cut above, but they looked like an army with possibilities on the table and nice models off the table. Turns out I actually really dislike painting the models. I got halfway through an army and just realized I'm not actually having any fun. It just didn't really suit my style. But yeah, I still like the models. I think they're cool.
I guess it's that challenge of this repetitive scheme of maybe ethereal, and how do you keep it alive and interesting while keeping a thematic, theme across the entire army. I think that's certainly a challenge. Ash, what drew you? What made you betray Gorka Morka and come over to the Nighthaunt?
Well, I'd already betrayed Gorka Morka before this. So before the Nighthaunt, I was playing my Tzeentch. And that was an army that it kind of felt, it played in every phase of the game, but as very hero phase weighted. So I wanted to choose an army that was slightly different play style. So I was looking for something that was more about the combat phase, and definitely more about the movement phase, like taking control of the movement phase. And because I felt like when I was playing my Tzeentch, that was where I was losing the games, was when I was not having the movement or the ball control enough to be able to play for the major win every time, particularly in some of the scenarios where you've got to like really push for it to get the major. So yeah, I guess that's sort of what drove me to starting a new army. And then the Nighthaunt was mostly love for the models when they came out, and seeing that new black coach when it was revealed. I think I was in love from first sight with that model. So
yeah, awesome. Sounds like it's and look, to be honest with you, when I saw that the new black coach, it was something that just kind of blew me away. When you look at the old Legions coach and then the new Nighthaunt coach, it's completely different world.
There's no comparison. Yeah,
I think for me,
I know when I saw Nick's one.
Yeah, that was the absolute sealer for me, was that model. It was just, okay, I'm doing this army. This is cool. And yeah, put a lot of time and effort into that model, and it's just so nice.
Yeah, and there's some really cool models. So obviously the model range is fantastic. It looks beautiful, potentially easy to paint. What are some of the other strengths that the Nighthaunt's going to have? If I'm going to pick this up, Ash, you've said the combat and the movement phase. Nick, what were some of the strengths that you picked up from the Nighthaunt book?
Yeah, just durability and relatively quick. They're a pretty sort of all-round army. They're not. They're definitely not slow. They're not the toughest army ever. They're not like the Bone Reapers are now, where everything's got the sort of 3-up rerollable saves. But the whole army's ethereal, and a lot of the units have 4-up saves. So you're 4-up ethereal on pretty much the entire army, which is just a pretty strong sort of pretty strong army. It's defensively very strong. So you combine that with this infantry that's all sort of movement 8. There's an item there that gives you +3 movement on units within, I think, 12 inches. And so you can actually get a pretty quick army. The coach is very fast, getting run and charge and stuff. So you've got actually a pretty quick army that's pretty durable, and some of the units have got pretty good damage output. So it's kind of not going to win any of those phases on its own, but it's going to do a little bit of everything apart from sort of shooting. It doesn't really chip in there.
Ash, anything that you found from a strength point of view?
Yeah, so I found that when I was building my Nighthaunt lists, I built it. Generally, I would build it around board control and area control. So I was building my list with endless spells in there to try and control the battle round when people were choosing first or second turn, and then I was throwing in things like the shackles, things like the shades, not the shades, sorry, the Night Vault Warband with the spell that would halve the movement. So I would really control a part of the board and stop my opponents from getting to use their models how they wanted to. And then with the maneuverability and the flexibility of being able to set up in the underworlds and then pop up where you wanted to, hit a weak part of the enemy army and roll across from there. If you roll a few 10+ charges, that's sort of the strength that I saw straight out of the bat. And so I sort of played into that.
I think for me, when I've ever played against the Nighthaunt army, the movement and the flexibility of the underworlds has really been the thing that's kind of stood out for me. The fact that you ignore rend modifiers, you've got a lot of different choices, whether you want to go large hordes of units or small units, you want to have something with lots of wounds, or you want something with 1 wound. There's a lot of different list builds, and the flexibility in this army is incredible. And you can almost throw a unit away and not worry about it. It doesn't have to be with a hero, and it's relatively durable. Put a hero next to it, and it's awesome. I don't know if that's how you guys see them, but I know as an opponent, I'm just like, the movement's the thing that always gets me. Is just coming out of the underworlds, running around the board. You've got a lot of board control.
Yeah, it's the board control, and it's also the surprising resilience that 4-up ethereal save gives you. Like, sometimes you're right. If you roll enough dice, you're gonna roll average. You're gonna lose half your guys half the time. But sometimes you're just gonna roll hot, and your opponent's gonna hate life because of it.
Yeah, you get times where sort of someone comes at you with some really high quality attacks. Something like multi-damage or high rend, or both. And you're hitting 4-ups, and often you've got reroll 1s from Mystic Shield or something like that. So you've got a 4-up with reroll 1s, and those really elite high damage, high rend units. You're like, okay, I don't actually care about that. It's when 60 grots are shooting you and actually just doing lots of crap damage that you actually run into a bit of trouble.
Yep.
Yeah. It's always been, for me, it's always been the army that is not certainly going to punch you in the face like, let's say, like a Khorne army. Or maybe like a Iron Jaws army, but it's certainly one of those ones where it's like, I'm defensive as all hell. You need to wrestle me off this objective, and it's gonna be a hard time. And for someone who's relying on rend, you're gonna have a bad day. And I remember one of my Squig armies, which is all about, it's a glass cannon, it has lots of rend, it can't take a punch back. It's like hitting you with a pillow. She's like, I don't care about rend -1, -2. It's just, I don't care. And my armor saves are like 5s and 6s, and then mortal wounds, boom. That's how I find them anyway.
Yeah.
But it's a good army. And obviously you guys have got Legion of Grief now, so you've got a plug into the Legions of Nagash book. And this month, which was December, you have 3 new battalions. So it's always an expanding range. So we've talked all the good stuff. What's the hot garbage stuff? What are the weaknesses when it comes to the Nighthaunt? Ash, I might throw it over to you. I threw the strengths to Nick. I'll throw you the opposite one.
Yeah, I think if you get pinned down into an ongoing slog, you're probably going to come out second. That's kind of why you need to build into your list ways of getting out of those combats and getting into the combats you want to, which is why I really rate the Blade Geist Revenants for that purpose. I guess other weaknesses for the army, if you're up against a real horde, you'll need that 10 plus charge to be able to deal enough damage to clear out the units to get your objectives back. It kind of plays as a lot more skirmishing around the edges of your opponent's army rather than like a big force of meat in the middle. So again, some of the scenarios where you do have to kind of fight over those central objectives, that can become a problem for the Nighthaunt.
Yeah. Nick, yourself, any other weaknesses that you found as you've been playing your army?
Yeah, for me, the biggest weakness is the character. So almost all of your characters are going to be 5 or 6 wounds. Okay, they've got a 4-up unrenderable, but that's generally it. There's not a great deal of character healing in the list. Alinda's got a little bit. The Spirit Torment does a bit, but most of them don't really heal. And you're very reliant on your heroes. But also your heroes need to get pretty close to the action, because all of the Nighthaunt being one of the first AOS 2 books, all of their rules are wholly within abilities. So you've got to be wholly within 12. And wholly within 12, when you're trying to pile into combat, you've got to get pretty close to combat with those characters to be able to do those buffs and stuff like that. So I find keeping your characters alive is pretty difficult, but it's also really crucial. And if you have games where someone picks out your characters, your units lack a lot of effectiveness. You get a lot of extra attacks and damage from things like the Spirit Torment giving you rerolls to hit or reroll ones for most units. The Knight of Shrouds on the Steed giving you +1 to attack, and the Guardian of Souls give you +1 to wound. So that actually adds a lot of your damage output, which isn't so great without it, as well as most of your healing. And without that, you really tend to struggle. And they are pretty exposed, because all 3 of those characters have 5 and 6 wounds.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the thing that I've noticed is, one, you don't have a lot of heroes that have 10 or more wounds. I'm someone that's really drawn by behemoth armies. I love big monsters, and that was the thing that I noticed that was quite lacking, is that you just don't have, other than the Black Coach, you just don't have that amazing Terrorgeist, Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. You don't have, outside of obviously Nagash, but that chunky, meaty monster just wasn't there for me.
Yeah, even the coach is not that, like, really that big. Its damage output is not super huge compared to a lot of big monsters, and it does get chipped away pretty quick.
Yeah, so if you like that type of army, high movement, you're very durable, especially with your 6-up saves. You can bring things back. Really cool army. But the weaknesses as well, certainly, you're really reliant on heroes. The fact that you guys don't have much shooting as well, and of your shooting, it's very short range. I think your Banshee Screams are like 8 or 9 inches. You've got some 10-inch shooting, but it's not really a viable 30-incher.
Yeah, you kind of, your biggest shooting that you've got in the list is if you take the Spectral Grasp on the Black Coach, which is 15 inches, I believe, and likewise the Chain Gusts have a shooting attack which is 15 inches. That's like sort of the max range you're going to get. Obviously with movement you can get that to 26-inch range on the Chain Gusts, and a little bit further on the Black Coach. But yeah, it's definitely not the high range super shooting army like your Stormcast Eternals or your Sylvaneth with the Kernel Hunters.
Catapult in the Bone Reaper army.
Yeah.
One day.
Wish I could ally that in.
One day. All right, so we've talked enough about the weaknesses. They're still a great army, lots of strength. So are we happy to start building lists and get an understanding of what I'm going to get for this allegiance?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
I'll bring up the page to make life a little bit easier. Nick, what do I get for being Nighthaunt compared to, let's say, Grand Alliance Death? So
there's just some sort of standard deathy sort of ones with so you've got the Deathless Spirits, the Ignoring Wounds on a 6-up, which is wholly within 12 of your general or a friendly Nighthaunt hero. So that's pretty standard for death. Aura of Dread is that neg 1 to Bravery within 6, which it occasionally pops up as being very relevant. You've got From the Underworlds They Come, which is just similar to the Storm cast. It's just the you can every second unit can be put in the Underworlds and come up anywhere on the table. Outside of 9 inches, can't move. Standard sort of teleportation rules. Feed on Terror, which honestly I didn't remember was a rule. I don't think I've ever used it.
That's the one that I always forget as well. Yeah,
I don't think any of my Nighthaunt opponents remembered that.
It's
because your heroes are very rarely within 6 inches.
Yeah, so they've got to fail a battle shock test, and so much stuff is either ignores battle shock or inspiring presence to ignore it. And then if you've got a hero within 6, you can heal 1 wound. It's like okay, whatever. Wave of Terror is probably the big one, which is that when the unit charges, if you roll a 10 to charge, you get to fight in the combat phase. You can pile in and fight in the combat phase. So it's a really interesting rule because you get a lot out of the unit that you put in, but then if you're playing a kind of army that wants to buff around characters, sometimes moving 10 in forward, sure you get to, potentially you're attacking twice, but a lot worse because you're out of range of some stuff. So I've certainly, when I started playing Nighthaunt, got caught out, got a bit excited, went, okay, I'm going to attack twice with this unit. Bang, up they go, attack twice, and it's like, okay, now they're just dead because they've gone a little bit too far. And then the last one is Spectral Summons, which is to use a command ability at the start of your movement phase. Pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit that's on the battlefield, remove that unit from the battlefield, and set it up wholly within 12 inches of your general and more than 9 inches from the enemy. Now, this is really good on the Dribbly Harrow as your general. I know Ash has used a heap, which he can teleport around the battlefield and then teleport units towards him. So that's the aspects of the ethereal hosts, as it's called.
Yeah. And obviously, should you want to use your Nighthaunt models in Legions of Nagash, you certainly trade off all these benefits, but instead you get access to the grave sites that Legions of Nagash have. So you can tap into that summonable regeneration grave sites, and that's all coming through the Legions of Grief as opposed to the Nighthaunt book. So that's probably another good call out, is that you've got a lot of different ways to play your army. And if you get tired of these rules and they're not quite working for you, you can certainly tap into the other side, which is the Legion of Grief within Legions of Nagash.
Yeah, and that's go Ash.
They're two very different ways of playing the army as well, which is really good because if you're playing in your Nighthaunt, you want to have lots of chances to roll those 10 plus charges, and you want to be keeping those units wholly within 12 inches of your heroes for those like overlapping buffs. So in Nighthaunt you'll run smaller size units, but in Legion of Grief you'll generally be running larger units because you want to make the most of that command ability to bring your whole unit back when it dies.
And for the benefits of people who have maybe they haven't picked up Legions of Nagash, Ash, do you want to add a little bit more to that?
I really don't want to, because I feel like Legion of Grief is kind of the sad cousin of the Nighthaunt Legions. It's playing it the easy way for those who don't enjoy the finesse style of the Nighthaunt Allegiance abilities. But if I'm forced into it, I'll tell people that the Legion of Grief gives you a lot of bravery debuff ability, and the way that the command ability works for that is the same as the Legions of Nagash, where if a unit is being destroyed, you can set up the whole unit again for 1 command point if your general is within 9 inches of one of your 4 grave sites that you start on the battlefield with. The grave sites are also really good for healing those bigger units back up to their starting strength as well. So that's why you generally see the larger size units for a Legion of Grief, for Legion of Nagash army, as opposed to the Nighthaunt armies.
Yeah, so there's certainly a lot of trade-offs that you don't get your battalions in Legions of Grief. But long story short, one of your strengths are you have 2 completely unique ways to play your army. So we're going to focus mostly on Legion of Nagash, on Nighthaunt, but we will touch on some of this stuff as we go through. So Ash has already called out one of those being the reward of larger units versus potentially smaller units. So pretty good traits overall for taking these guys as an allegiance. To wrap off some of the other allegiance stuff, is it fair to assume no, there is no terrain piece that you get access to?
Nope.
If you do go Legions of Nagash, you would get a grave site, but under Nighthaunt, no, you do not. And is there any ways to customize it with a sub-allegiance? So you know how Daughters of Cain have their temples, Stormcast have their chambers. Is there any customization in the Ash is shaking his head? No. So basically what's in the book is what's in the book. There is no sub-allegiance within this book.
No, the variety that you get comes from the battalions and the unit choices that you take, because you do have a lot of unit choices to go from. And the battalions do change the way that you play the army pretty significantly as well.
Yeah, great. Sounds like we got some interesting rules to play with as we build the lists. So, do we want to start building a list? Start talking about some of the strengths, the weaknesses, and maybe why you guys are taking those unit choices.
Yeah, man.
Cool. So I was going to scroll the page very, very slightly and try to find my screenshots. So the points in the book, correct me if I'm wrong, the points in the battle tome is not the correct points. They have been upgraded in the General's Handbook. Right now we're using General's Handbook 2019. Is that correct?
Correct.
Sweet. Yeah. Just to make sure, just in case. So most armies will start their list building process at the hero level. Is that true with Nighthaunt? Is it usually do you guys pick a hero and start building around that?
I don't really for Nighthaunt. I think there's some key heroes that you need, but the heroes are generally not that expensive, and there's no kind of one big hero that totally changes the way your list works. So for me, it's more about the style of list I want to do. Generally, my lists are Bladegeist heavy, and the Bladegeist synergize well with the Spirit Torment and the Knight of Shrouds on the steed. So for me, those sort of come as a package. But yeah, there's a few sort of different options as to which characters you take and which units. But yeah, I tend to start with the units for the Nighthaunt.
Ash, is that true for yourself as well?
Yeah, I think that's the same with me. Generally, for the Nighthaunt, I'll start actually with a battalion, because that'll sort of guide the unit choices and the hero choices that I start with, and then you can build the way it interacts and fill out your battle line around that as well. So again, like Nick, my lists, I do like to include the Shroud Guard battalion. I find that it's super strong and good for reducing your drops. And yeah, so I'll generally. Well, for the lists that I was doing quite well with, I would take the Shroud Guard, and so that sort of chooses your Bladegeist. So then I'd put in some Chain Gusts because they synergize well with that, as well as the Spirit Torment, and then sort of work from there, fill in the battle line with some minimum size Chain Rasp units and a couple of Grimghasts, that sort of thing.
Just like herding cats with you guys. All right, I'm trying to find like a nice way we can pick a point on the list building process. Most of my guests will make my life easy and go, yeah, hero choice is a good start. So I'm gonna pick the line in the sand, and let's start with our battle line choices. You've got to have, if we're playing 2,000 points, a minimum of 3 battle line choices. So let's talk about our battle line. So you have your Chain Rasp Horde, which is your only generic battle line. You've got one generic battle line. However, if you take Nighthaunt, which we're assuming we are, you also have your Grimghast Reapers that are battle line. You've got your Hex Raids that are battle line. You've got your Spirit Host, which are battle line. So, Nick, what's a good battle line choice that you go for, and why, and how do you build around it? Or more importantly, do you take small units? Do you take large sizes?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit different in the way I do it to Ash. Ash is pretty known for his sort of MSU Nighthaunt smaller units. I'm generally more of a medium unit build. I like the Grimghast Reapers. It's a bit tough. They've had a points hike. I think they copped a bit of flack for people using them in Legions of Nagash, with Nagash in that sort of Grimghast Nagash build that I might have come second at CanCon with. So I'm probably part of the problem here.
Out of 220 odd players.
Yeah, so maybe it's my fault, but the Grimgast Reapers got a points hike, which I don't think they deserved in Nighthaunt. They were insanely good with Nagash, but I don't think they were over the top in Nighthaunt. I think they're
Agreed.
A decent
100% agree.
Copping that points increase from, I think they were 140 before, now they're 160 for 10. I think Nighthaunt struggle with their battle line. Chain Rasp Hordes are decent, but they're not good and they're not amazing. They're not terrible either. And you can kind of run them two ways. You can run small units of Chain Rasp for 80 points and just get 3 units of them for minimum battle line. Alternatively, you can use larger units, and some of the battalions support that. But for me, it's between Chain Rasp Horde and Grimgast Reapers. Your other two options are Hex Wraiths and Spirit Hosts. I'll probably cop a bit of flack for downing the Hex Wraiths. I don't really rate them particularly well. I don't think their sort of slashing attack is particularly good, and they just don't do the damage output for me. And Spirit Hosts, I think, they just don't do enough attacks. Not being able to buff that 6s to hit, because it's on natural 6s, they do a mortal wound. Not being able to buff that is problematic. The best thing you can do is have them hitting on 5s, rerolling 1s, and that just, the damage output on Spirit Host is not that great. And you get 9 wounds for 120 points with a 4-up, 6-up. Hang on. They got how many wounds each? They got 6. 3.
3 wounds each.
3 wounds. Sorry. 6 attacks. 6 attacks. 3 wounds each. Yeah. So you get 9 wounds for 120 points versus previously it was 140 points for 10 Grimgast, which was 10 wounds with the same sort of level of save and probably better damage output. So yeah, I think battle line's a problem for Nighthaunt, and most armies will take a minimum battle line. Certainly I tended to take 1 or 2 units of 10 Chain Rasps and then a unit of Grimgast Reapers for mine.
So what I'm hearing is your Grimgast, your Chain Rasps, some of these other battle line choices, not the best. Obviously, they have their places in some particular armies, but for you, it's more about the points going into your heroes and some more of those elite units.
Yeah.
Ash, Nick mentioned that you have a bit of a different view on the world, which is always good to have different views. What are your thoughts around your battle line choices?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Nick in his sort of roundup of the battle line choices. Definitely for myself, I think point for point at the moment, because of what happened to Grimgast Reapers, the Chain Rasps are the most efficient battle line choice. So I'd probably rate them as the best out of the options. Probably followed closely by the Grimgast Reapers because of their raw damage output and not needing as many buffs nearby, because they have their own sort of internal synergy. As long as you put it into the right unit, of course. I think the Hex Wraiths have a place now. I think they always did have a place, and having a points drop in this General's Handbook going from 160 down to 140, they kind of replaced the Grimgast Reapers at that kind of 10 wound, 4-up save, 2 attacks each doing mortals on 6s. They've kind of replaced them in that kind of role. Obviously, you don't get as many bodies on the board, but with a couple of the battalions, they can be super useful, very flexible, and with some of the new stuff that we've seen little snippets of from the White Dwarf, I think you'll see a few of these lists with some Hex Raids in them floating about, even if they're just to soak up some wins for your heroes. Spirit Hosts, again, it's more of a very a unique build that you put your army into if you're going to take Spirit Hosts as your battle line. It's the Execution Horde, and I've not seen it do well on the tabletop. I know some people that have run it. Generally, those people are the people that had the army prior to the battle tome, so they had the Spirit Hosts all built up, ready to go. I think it's okay. It's got some good resilience in there, and it's got some good spike damage, but it's just not consistent enough for me, I think. And
with things like your Chain Rasps, are you taking them, and for anyone who doesn't know, the term MSU means multiple small units, so you're taking the minimum unit size, which in the case of Chain Rasps is 10. What do you think is an ideal number? Is it taking Chain Rasps in units of 10? Do you like something in the middle, like the 20 or 30 range? Or are you taking the benefit of 40 for the discounted rate of 280 points?
Again, I think it depends on the battalion you take. I know I'm throwing you around the loop here with not being able to pin me down on the right
It's true though.
order of things, but it's true. If you're going to take the condemned or the chain guard, you'll be looking at least 20 min-sized units, obviously, because that's what you need for that battalion, and you'd probably see a 40 in as one of those units as well. But if you're not going to use them in the battalions for those purposes, I think the minimum size units for their board control and because they fly as well, you can always be rolling charges with all of your units, and just like hoping for or planning for as many 10+ charges as you can make happen.
And that's a really good point. So there is no one particular silver bullet way of building this army. You've got a lot of cool choices, and I'm hearing the importance of the battalion really. I don't think any faction focus has relied on the battalion as much as what I'm hearing from you guys right now, which is very, very cool when we get into those battalions. But I think you guys are 100% correct. The times where I've had the most trouble against a Nighthaunt army has always been those 10 or more units, and they just drop down a whole bunch and really try to maximize that 10-inch charge. And only the other week I played an army, and I think he got 3 out of about 12 10-inch charges, and that damage output was pretty crazy because he did get the right units to get that 10+. So it was pretty lucky, but I can hear why you may not want to go down that maximum size unless you were going to take this into a Legions of Nagash build. Cool. Anything else you guys want to add from a battalion point of view, or do we want to talk about our hero choices?
I mean, there's a lot to say about the battalions, but maybe...
Oh, sorry, not battalions, battle line. Sorry, battle line. As if I'm going to skip the battalions. The battle line. Anything we want to talk about with the battle line?
I almost think you need to flip it because, as Ash has sort of said, the War Scroll battalions are they're not all amazing, but they all very much change the way you build their list because you can put a large amount of stuff into those War Scroll battalions. I think, like, as Ash said, the first thing he looks at is those battalions and what goes in those. So I think the battalions are a pretty key facet of building a Nighthaunt list.
It's almost like choosing your Legion from the other books.
Yeah.
Let's talk about them then. So I'm just going to bring them all up. I'm sure you guys have them literally in front of you. So you've got how many choices have you got? So you've got your Chain Guard, you've got the Condemned, you've got the Deathstalker, you've got the Death Rider, you've got the Executioner's Horde, you've got the Nighthaunt Procession, you've got the Shrieker Host, and you've got the Shroud Guard, and you've got that's an endless spell. And then obviously you guys have 3 additional ones. So do we want to talk about the battalions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So what's a Nick, I'll throw it to you first. What's a good battalion and why?
All right, so my go-to is the first one on the list. The second one. So the Nighthaunt Procession is one of those War Scroll battalions. So you don't really see those, but it's the Shroud Guard is what I use the most. So the Shroud Guard consists of the following units: a Knight of Shrouds or Riken or the Grimhaler. Both of them are good options, and you can take the Knight of Shrouds on the Ethereal Steed in that, and 2 units of Bladegeist Revenants. And so what this gives you is that you can roll the dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to a Bladegeist Revenant unit, wholly within 12 inches of the Knight of Shrouds or Riken, and their sort of ignore wound save happens on a 5+ rather than a 6+. So you've got a unit here that is going to be on a 4+ Ethereal, possibly with a reroll 1s from Mystic Shield, and then you've got a 5+ death save. So that really makes these units tough, and I tend to put at least 1 unit of 20 Bladegeist Revenants in there because I think they're the best unit in the book. This just kind of buffs them out a little bit and it makes them really tough. So you've got 20 of them with a 4+, 5+. That's really tough to drop, really difficult to drop. And then you can put a fair bit of healing back in there so that you actually, if you can heal sort of 8 to 10 of them a turn, it's going to make it really difficult for your opponent to kill them. And that, and they're my kind of favorite unit because they're fast. They're movement 8 base. They're tough with that 4+, 5+, and they're actually one of the more offensively powerful units in the Nighthaunt book. They've got 2 attacks base. They get an extra 1 for charging, and then you can give them another 1 from the Knight of Shrouds. But they also have an ability where they can retreat and charge. So they're one of the most sort of movement flexible units in the Nighthaunt book. They can engage, then they can disengage, jump onto an objective, or they can just rebound back into combat. And so you get more chances that wave of terror, you get more chances to get that +1 attack on the charge, and you get more movement flexibility. So for me, the Shroud Guard's my favorite battalion. It's got some of the best units in the book. It buffs them, and yeah.
Is there any other units that complement the Shroud Guard really well that doesn't sit within the battalion?
Yeah, so you want to take a Spirit Torment and possibly the Chain Ghasts that Ash mentioned before. So Spirit Torment gives units wholly within 12 rerolling 1s to hit, but for Blade Geist Revenants, it gives them reroll all their attacks, so they're on 3s with reroll. So lots of high quality attacks then.
And the Chain Ghasts gives them that same buff for the rerolling all their hits as well.
Correct.
Cool. Ash, a battalion from yourself?
Sure. So the second battalion that I've sort of built a few lists around would be the Death Riders. So the reason I think this one's good is because it plays around one of the scarier allegiance abilities that you get as a part of the Nighthaunt book. So the Death Riders battalion is 1 to 2 Dribbly Harrows, which are fantastic value for what they do in the army. I think they're 90 points now, which is just insane. So 1 to 2 of those guys, 2 units of Hex Wraiths, and a Black Coach. Now, people have poo-pooed the Black Coach as much as they want to, but I love my Black Coach, and I'm going to take it in every Nighthaunt army I take. So putting some extra value into him using this battalion is definitely worthwhile. So what the battalion gives you is it adds 1 to the charge rolls for your units in the battalion. And in addition, if you make an unmodified charge roll of a 9+ for the unit from the battalion, it can fight immediately after you complete the charge. So that gives you, I think it's something like 4 or 5 more chances of getting that extra fight on your 2d6 dice roll, just like straight off the bat. And because you've got between 4 and 5 units in that battalion, pretty much you'd be relying on one of those units getting to fight twice every turn. And yeah, so getting to fight twice with the Black Coach is fantastic because he dishes out so many attacks. So I like to compare him nowadays to the chariot from Slaanesh, the Exalted Seeker Chariot. It's got a similar type of like mass attack output, which when you're rolling enough dice, it can do a little bit of damage, but it's got the added bonus of being able to do some mortal wounds in there as well. So if you get to attack twice with that before your opponent gets to make any attacks, you've got a good chance of dealing enough damage to bring some enemy units down, especially if you're fighting into a unit that's got 5 or more models, because you get to reroll those hits for your Reaping Scythe from the guy on the top. And especially as well, if you've upgraded the coach, I think it's 2 levels, gives you reroll 1s to hit as well. So that's something to note as well with the Black Coach. It upgrades at the start of the battle round. And I've got to do a quick shout out to Tom, one of the guys at the local store at Chatswood. I played him last week and I upgraded the coach fully in 2 turns and it just caused havoc. So that was fantastic. I thought I'd give him a shout out. But yeah, so the Death Riders battalion is really good for that. The Hex Wraiths, like I said, they're pretty good value for their points now at 140. Not very many bodies in that battalion, but I think in this battalion I'd look at taking probably minimum. So maybe I'd go 1 minimum 5 unit of Hex Wraiths and then a unit of 10 or 15, just to try and get the most out of that 9+ charge. And yeah, I'd probably stick to 1 Dreadblade Harrow and have him as my general. So that sort of gives you a good base. You've got 2 battle line, you've got your general that's a hero as well, and you've got a behemoth, so you can build the rest of your army around fixing that to work better.
Awesome. What about the Condemned? Maybe this is an open question for either of you. Maybe I'll go through the rest of them and we'll do them in chronological order. So the next battalion in the book is the Condemned, which is your Spirit Torment, your unit of Chain Ghast, and 2 units of Chain Ras Hordes. But each of those hordes must contain 20 models. So you can't do the minimum of 10. You've got to take that 20. Do either of you rate this particular battalion?
I really like it.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it loses out a little bit to the value that you see in the other battalion that includes the 20s of chain rasps. Just because the chain rasp hordes, I think that this battalion is the one where you would go with 2 40s of chain rasps, just to get the extra value, because you've also got the extended range on the buff from the chain gusts and the spirit torment. So it's a 15-inch range for re-rolling failed hit rolls, whereas normally their buff is only 12 inches. So because you've got that extended range, you can afford to have the larger units. And I think so the way the other battalion works, the chain guard, it brings back an extra D6 models whenever you cast the healing spell from the Guardian of Souls. So this one kind of works in the way that if you've got more models to start out with, you're not going to lose as many before you get to hit your opponent getting all those rerolls. The other one sort of works on the flip side, where you can go the slightly smaller units of 20 or 30, and you've got more chance of bringing them back up to the full size to keep them at that sort of fighting strength. So I guess this one and the chain guard are they work similarly in that you're using the similar units of the chain rasps, but they kind of play around it differently with the different heroes supporting them.
Yeah, I prefer the chain guard to the condemned. I find them both really funny because they specify that you need units of at least 20 models, when there's just no way you would ever take them with units of 10. It just wouldn't make sense.
No.
One of them's for extra healing on your unit, and the other one's for extra attacks. You just would never take them as units of 10. I just find it very, very funny that they kind of put that restriction, but it's just me, I guess.
Yeah, I can hear now why the battalions are definitely a critical piece in this army, as opposed to a nice to have, which in some armies, like, yeah, I can do without them, and they're all right. But here I can see how really they do shape the army build much more than the average book. So interesting call out, boys. Nick, you were talking about the chain guard, which is, I guess, the other big one that involves the chain rasp horde of at least 20 or more models. And that also requires you to have that Guardian of Soul.
Yeah, so it gives you the Guardian of Souls and 2 chain rasp hordes of at least 20. Generally, you do 30s or 40s for this, because basically each time a chain rasp horde from this battalion is affected by the Spectral Lure cast by the battalion's Guardian of Souls, you can return D6 slain models to the unit. That's in addition to the D6 that you're bringing back from the... is it D6 from the...
Yep, D6 from the Spectral Lure.
Yeah, so the Spectral Lure is D6. So you're getting 2 D6 back. So it increases the amount you can raise, because you're doing that, and then you're going to have another couple of D3 from various other sources. So they make for a tanky sort of build, whereas the Condemned is more of a sort of offensive kind of build. But chain rasps work pretty well with the Guardian of Souls, because their attacks are pretty low quality. They're just 4s and 4s, but they +1 to wound is pretty good.
Yeah. I think either of these battalions as well, I would take the hero from the other battalion. So I would take the Spirit Torment alongside this one, the Chain Guard, to support the units of Chain Rasps to give them the reroll 1s to hit. And likewise, I would take the Guardian of Souls alongside the Condemned to give them the +1 to wound as well.
Yeah. They're kind of units that they can pump out a lot of attacks, but they're all low quality. But if you can start buffing that up, then we're looking at having a bit of decent output.
Mm-hmm.
If I was building around the Chain Rasp Horde, would I ever take both of them, the Chain Guard and the Condemned?
They're both pretty expensive. So, one of them's got a hero, a unit that's basically a hero in the Chain Ghasts, and then 2 units of Chain Rasp Horde that are at least 160 points each, plus the battalion cost. So they're, given you want big units in both of them, you're kind of going to have 3 or 4 max size units of Chain Rasp Horde. It's such a huge chunk of your army. And Chain Rasps are decent, but they're only movement 6. They're certainly not sort of the best unit in the book.
So I'm really choosing one or the other as opposed to taking them both.
I think so.
And you can kind of get a bit of and why I prefer the Chain Guard over the condemned is there's an item that you can take that gives you rerolls to hit for a turn, and so you can kind of get the effects of one of them while taking the other one. So you whack that on your Guardian of Souls. It means you're a bit all in on that character, and if he gets killed, you're in trouble. But it means that unit can, for that one turn, have that +1 to wound and have the rerolls to hit, and actually just do all that damage output.
Yeah, great. What about the Execution Horde? Now, I know we're thinking maybe the Spirit Hosts aren't the most optimum. And by the way, when we talk about these lists, guys, I do want to highlight that we're looking at this very much at a tournament competitive point of view. If the Spirit Hosts or one of these models in the range is your favorite model and you want to build around it, and it's absolutely the best thing since sliced bread, please don't let us stop you building the army that you want to. Do what you want to do. We're talking at this at a more competitive level and getting the most out of your army and efficiency. So I just want to put that context down, just guys, just in case you're like, oh, but I really like Spirit Hosts. Speaking of Spirit Hosts, we've got the Execution Horde, which is at 1 Lord Executioner and 3 units of Spirit Hosts. Do we like this? Is it not very good? What do I get from it? Subtracting 1 from the hit rolls or attacks that target this battalion within 6 of the... What do we think of the Executioner's Horde?
I mean, I think it's trash. I'm going to straight up say I think it's trash.
Why is that? Is that because you're forced to take the Spirit Hosts?
I think Lord Executioners aren't particularly great. They don't offer any real buffs to the army. Spirit Hosts, I think, are pretty trash, and you've got to take 3 units of them. So you're kind of taking something that's not great and 3 units of something that's not great and making your Lord Executioner a little bit harder to kill, but at the end of the day, he's one model that his damage output's not that high. He doesn't buff your units. He just... This kind of build is very far from what the rest of the Nighthaunt book does. The rest of the Nighthaunt book is all supportive, layered buffs and making sure things are in the right place. This is just, here's 3 units of Spirit Hosts. They do what they do. Here's the Lord Executioner. It all just attacks in combat, moves 6 inches, and doesn't really do anything interesting, and the battalion doesn't offer anything.
Sounds like Nick thinks we're polishing a turd here. Ash?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think if you wanted to make the most out of Spirit Hosts, I probably wouldn't take this battalion, but what I would do is look at ways of bringing back multiple Spirit Hosts back into a single unit of 9 or 12, because there's a few ways in the book. There's a few spring to mind. There's Lady Alinda, there's the Black Coach, and there's the Rule of the Spirit Hosts command trait, where you can bring back models to a unit. So because the Spirit Hosts are 3 wound models, if you take one of those big units of 9 or 12, as they start to die, you can really punish people for trying to chip away at that unit without finishing it off in one go.
Yeah, I've run a list with a coach and a unit of 9, a unit of 6, and a Linda, and then you've got Ruler of the Spirit Hosts as well. And it's like, okay, so Elinda's command ability is raise 1 to each unit within 12. So you're generally getting 2 Spirit Hosts back per command point with that. You're getting D3 per unit from the coach, and you're getting D3 from the Ruler of the Spirit Host. So you potentially, if you've got 1 Spirit Host standing there, you can potentially raise like 6 or 7 of them back, which is heaps and heaps of wounds. So as far as raising efficiency, if you're going to run Spirit Host, that's the way you got to do it, because their output's poor, their movement's poor, so you've got to sort of play up that resilience aspect.
Yep. Yeah, I know from a Legions of Nagash point of view, I always find the Spirit Host really difficult, being that they're 3 wounds and you're really relying on that 5 or 6 to regenerate them if you're playing on that side of the field, whereas opposed to those, the Chain Rasp or the Grimghast, which is 1 or 2 wounds, they're much easier to bring back and heal. So I think that's the challenge always with while they've got a lot of wounds on the base, to bring them back, it can be challenging.
We talked about Grimghast Reapers and Bladegeist Revenants. That's what you want to be summoning. You get D3 of them back. Even if you roll a 1, you get 1 of them back. But if you roll that 5 or 6, you can have a Spirit Host, but you could also have 3 of your Shroud Guarded Bladegeist Revenants, and that's just a much better option.
Yeah, and you can start daisy chaining them and move it, creeping up the board as you regenerate. So where you don't have that ability really with your Spirit Hosts. There's 2 others in the book, and then there's 3 in White Dwarf December. We've got the Deathstalkers, which is your Khan Wraith, your 2 units of Grimghast Reapers, 2 units of your Stalkers. Do either of you guys like the Deathstalker Battalion?
No, this is in my opinion, worse than the Execution Horde.
Wow, so another polishing of the turd. We're just why is this a polishing of the turd?
I don't know.
Well, your Khan Wraith is pretty useless. The Glaive Wraith Stalkers do not do anything for the points that you're paying for them, even though you're not paying very many. They just don't do anything. And your Grimghast Reapers. Sorry, say again, Nick.
They're just objectively, they're just so bad. The Stalkers.
They're just so bad. And like your Grimghast Reapers, generally you'll have them near a Guardian of Souls for the +1 to wound, and they'll be re-rolling hits anyway. So getting that benefit from the soul marked unit as it's really very, very minimal, and very situational and just plain bad, I think.
So the Deathstalker, you pick an enemy unit on the table at the start of the game. Anyone in this battalion gets +1 to hit and +1 to wound if that unit is attacking that one unit, so that soul marked unit. So the Khan Wraith, probably not a good choice. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about the points hike in the Grimmies as well as the Stalkers. We're probably finding not the best choice when it comes to our points. We've got much better places to spend our points in.
Yeah, for sure.
Final battalion in this book, other than the Mega Battalion, which is the Shrieker host. So that's your Tomb Banshee, your 2 units of your Harridans, and your 2 units of Mi'kmaq Banshees. They could knock on your door, I don't know, but the Mi'kmaq Banshees. And it's going to let you re-roll Battle Shock for 1, and there's other cool stuff in there. So what do we think of the Shrieker host? Is this a good one? Nick's like, not as bad.
If you could take it in Legion of Grief, I genuinely think you'd give it a run.
100%.
So the issue with these units are they're all, not so much the Mi'kmaq Banshees, but the Banshee and the Dreadsouth Harridans. They're all, what's it called? Battle Shock related, and they're all bravery related. And so the just average bravery of units in Age of Sigmar is too high for their effects to be useful. But if you can take them in Legions of Grief, then you've actually got a bunch of bravery debuffs and stuff like that you can actually start stacking on things, and it starts making their effects sort of more useful. The issue being the average, like a Banshee is just a 2d6 roll minus the bravery, I think. And for most units, it's just not going to do anything because there's just whole armies that are bravery 10. So I would love, I think the Mi'kmaq Banshees are really cool, but they don't work as well in Nighthaunt as they do in Legion of Grief. Same thing with Dreadsouth Harridans. So yeah, I think it'd be cool, but it's not really viable in a Nighthaunt Legends.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's stop talking about that polishing of the turd, and let me bring up one of the 2 White Dwarf battalions. So there are 3. One is a Mega Battalion, and I'll scroll up really quickly so you can see it. It is very much taking the 2 new battalions and then at least a combination of some of the new ones. So you're probably not doing that unless you're having a mega game. But one of the 2, the first of the 2 is the Forgotten Saiyans. I'm trying to read it from afar. Skins, so I can't read it. You guys can. Right. Yeah. Perfect. I got it right the first time. So what have you got? You got the Knight of Shrouds on the Ethereal Steed. Is it Makor? I can't read it from here. And you got 2
Malkor.
Malkor, yep.
That's like his name in the narrative.
Gotcha. So we've got to take him, and then we've got the 2 Dreadblade Harrows. And what do you get for this? You get to add 1 to the attack characteristics of the Sword of the Stolen Hours. In addition, once per battle round, you can use the command ability on the Malkor's War Scroll without using a command point being spent. So thoughts on this particular battalion?
It's okay. It gives you 5 free command points across the battle if you can keep Marco alive. So that's not too bad when you consider that a command point's worth 50 points. I'm trying to remember what the point value is for this battalion though, because I feel like this one was more expensive.
Just down
than the
here.
other one.
So this one's worth
140.
140, and then the second one's 120. So the Forgotten is 140.
Yeah, I think it's you probably don't get enough in the battalion to make it worth like reducing your drops and that sort of thing. I think you're better off taking some other battalions unless you want to go for that super battalion, because it does actually fit into 2,000 points, the big battalion.
I'll show it up in a minute.
Yeah, that's okay. It's I think it's okay. It's got there's a way that you could build it to make it work, but you're definitely hoping for there's a lot of hoping for things rather than reliable outcomes.
Yeah.
So this one is
Yeah, for 140 points, you're getting a command point for the battalion. You're getting an extra item, and some of the items for Nighthaunt are good, and then you're getting, potentially a bit of command point efficiency with the Knight of Shrouds. And you're probably taking a Knight of Shrouds most games, and you're probably taking a Dreadblade Harrow. The issue is you're probably not taking a second Dreadblade Harrow, and that's where the points really creep up. That's 100 points that you probably wouldn't be spending. So it's kind of like 240 points for the battalion, not 140.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's okay, but it's probably not cost effective. And at the end of the day, it's really only giving you cost efficiency on your command points. So yeah, I wouldn't take it.
Yep, fair enough. And then you've got the Dolores Guard, which is, I know Nick's going to be really keen on this one. So you get to take 2 to 4 units of Hex Raids. And what do you get for that? So this is 120 points, and you get to add one to the attack characteristics of melee weapons used by units from this battalion, which, surprise to the century, is Hex Raids. If they've made a charge in the same turn. In addition, roll a dice before you allocate a wound or a mortal wound to your general. If your general's within 3 of any of the units from this within this ability, on a 2+, you must allocate that wound or mortal wound to a friendly unit from the ability with this ability that's within 3 inches of your general instead of to your general. That's a big block of text.
It is. I think it's a really good one. I think this one's really good. It would be, again, probably 1,000 times better if you could take it in Legion of Grief. But I think in the regular Nighthaunt, being able to protect someone like Lady Olinda if you wanted to take her as your general, or even protect that Dreadblade Harrow that you're more likely to have as your general, because he's only 5 wounds with a 4-up save. So if you can give him an extra 20 wounds that you can pass off on a 2+, that's pretty good value for 120 points that this battalion costs you.
Yeah.
It does force you to take the Hex Wraith units, but giving them an extra attack on the charge, when you combine that with perhaps a Knight of Shrouds and all the other buffs that you can put onto them, I think it does make them worth their 140 points, maybe even a bit of an efficient choice for 140 points.
And if you were going to build this particular battalion, do you think you would just go the minimum and go with 2? Or do you think 3 and 4 units would be a worthwhile investment?
I could see you running 3.
Yeah, I think 3 and decent size units. Like I look at this and I think there's potential in a list with Lady Olinda and like 3 units of like 10 or 15 Hex Wraiths. Suddenly Lady Olinda's really difficult to kill. You put some stuff in there to make sure you've got lots of command points, because you're getting 1 from this, you're going to buy 1, and then you're going to probably have the Aether Quartz brooch. And so you're going to want lots of command points, and then so for every command point you spend, you're going to be getting like 3 Hex Wraiths back. The army's going to be super durable. It's going to have that bit more damage output, and it's going to be hard to kill Olinda. And Olinda, when she stays around, she does a fair few mortal wounds to stuff. She heals stuff back. She's actually pretty decent. So yeah, I think that's what I think of when I look at this. And then you've got a very quick, very durable army.
And you can always combine this with things like the Shroud Guard or some of the other battalions if you go down this route.
Yeah, it'll be tough. It's going to be an expensive army. Hex Wraiths aren't cheap, but
I think if you're going down this route, either you're doing you're going all in for the big mega battalion, or you're building sort of a larger battalion of that of the Dolores Guard, and just fitting in units around it that work really well. So yeah, like a Lady Linda for the healing. Same thing with your Ruler of the Spirit Hosts. You can put that onto your Dribbly Harrow or onto another hero, and then the Black Coach as well as the other one that fits in there really well. Bringing back multiple hex rates a turn is good value as well.
Yeah. As you said, and traditionally your larger battalions, your mega battalions, you often don't have the points in a 2000, but you're saying that the big one, which is going to be the Emerald Host, is certainly doable. So what do you have to do? You have to take one of the Forgotten Saiyans. You've got to take 1+ Dolores Guard. Then any number of the following, so either a Condemned, Chain Guard, Deathstalkers. There's no number towards it, so is that an optional thing?
Yeah, so any number means you can take 0, which is probably what you do.
Yeah.
So you're looking at paying for the 3 battalions. I think this mega battalion is only 80 points. It's pretty cheap for getting the extra ability in there. If that's
it's 80 points. Yeah. Emerald Host is 80. Yeah. Plus, if you take the Forgotten, it's 140. The Dolores is 120. So you're about, what's that?
340.
340 if you take one of each.
Yeah, so you're looking at 340 points. You get the benefits from the other 2 battalions, which we already said one of them's really good, one of them's okay, probably not super efficient for its points, but putting it into this makes it pretty okay. So after the armies are set up before the first battle round begins, you can pick one enemy hero and you subtract 1 from save rolls for attacks that target that hero. Now, if your opponent has an Archaon or an Alariel or something like that, which is normally on a 3-up save, a Mega Blossom Maw Crusher, taking that to a 4+ save when most of your army has Rend as well is super good. Now, because it does say subtract 1, if your opponent's got that Ethereal Amulet on the big hero, you're not going to be able to help yourself with that. But then you can just choose one of their support heroes. I think it's kind of okay. It combos well with giving you Hex Rays extra attacks, and because they've got the Rend on their attacks as well. And also that kind of works well with the other battalion giving you Hex Rays extra attacks as well. It kind of all just works in together nicely to create a nice unified army. So if you did want to build a themed army around the Emerald Host from the White Dwarf battalions, I think you could do it, and I think it'd go okay. I don't think it's a 4-1 or a 5-0 list, but I think it's a solid 3-2 one way or the other.
Cool. So I think overall we've heard you have mostly good battalions. It's not like some particular armies where there's just 1 or 2 that stand out. It sounds like probably 2/3 of those are some good choices. It's just going to depend on the type of build, the types of units that attract to you, and potentially the play style and some of the benefits you want to get from those battalions that might lead you towards which one suits your play style more, depending if you want, your Grimghast, you want Hex Raids, you want, so many different choices. It's very cool. You got something there for everyone.
Yeah, there's just lots of different options. So I've kind of been inspired here a little bit. I've just done a quick list in War Scroll Builder in the background with that new battalion. And you can actually get Lady Alinda, a Dreadblade Harrow, 3 units of 15 Hex Wraiths, and a Black Coach is 1830 points. Now the battalion's 120, is that right?
120.
120, so that gives you 50 points for your extra command point, and you're in business. Bang on 2,000.
Pretty damn good. That sounds
good.
We
might have seen a CanCon list coming out here.
That's something I might have to play, I think. Not that I own experience, and I don't want to pay any.
I love it. So it sounds like a lot of cool battalion choices, which I guess we've kind of overarched and touched on a lot of different unit choices. So it might be nice now that we've kind of got a rough idea, or we've kind of talked about the battalions, which of the hero choices might be good ones that might be complementary to all, some that might be situational. So looks like you've got a bunch of ones, whether it's your Underworlds, the Briar Queen that comes with her thorns. You've got a Can Wraith, you've got your Dreadblade Harrow, you've got your Guardian of Souls with the Nightmare Lantern, you've got your Knight of Shrouds, Knight of Shroud on Ethereal Steed, you've got Kurdos, you've got Alinda, Lord Executioner, Reichner, Spirit Torment, Tomb Banshee, and in the I'm just going to call it out now. The biggest travesty in Age of Sigmar is that the Black Coach is not a hero. I'm just putting it in the workshop.
Oh god!
So it was right.
So
the war scroll that's in the box with the Black Coach has the hero keyword, and they took it off the battle tome. Why?
As the official coach, I'm saying make it back as a hero choice. I am a hero, and I do not like just being a behemoth.
Yeah.
Although my nickname sometimes is the Black Coach, so when things aren't going my way, sometimes the Black Coach comes out and he levels up.
Maybe a new nickname can be the Behemoth as well. That kind of works pretty well as well.
Yeah, that's rather insulting at my weight.
I would never do that. That doesn't sound like me.
Anyway, let's talk about leader choices as opposed to my aesthetics. So, of the hero choices, are there ones that stand out for you guys more than others? Nick, I'll throw it to you first. What stands out for you?
I was going to talk about the Dribbly Harrow, but I won't, because that's definitely Ash's jam. For me, I want to talk about the Spirit Torment, and we've kind of talked about it already, but it's just this really good all-round support piece. So it gives reroll 1s to hit for units wholly within 12. Rerolls all things, all hit rolls for Bladegeist units, which are my favorite unit. It also is actually kind of good in combat. It's got D3 damage attacks, and so it actually surprisingly can do a bit of damage in combat. But it does a bit of healing as well, and it can heal characters, and so nothing else in the book really heals characters that well. So depending on, I think you have to kill 3 models from the enemy army or something like that, and if you manage to kill 3 models, you get to heal all units within 6 for D3. Wounds, and so I think that's really strong. Actually, being able to sort of heal your heroes and heal the units around it. So just an all round strong character for 120 points.
Great, Ash.
Yeah, I was tempted just to throw around to something else, not the Dribbly Harrow, but I can't do it. So yeah, it's
seize the day.
I've got to talk about him. So the Dribbly Harrow. I think he's the most value for 90 points that you'll get in any list. I know that there's some good choices in some lists, but for 90 points, you've got a 12-inch move, 5 wound, 4+ save hero. He's not too bad in combat. He's got 3 attacks, 3s by 3s, -1/1 damage. The kind of thing that works really well for him is he's got this ability called Phantasmal Discorporation. So the way that works, if the model is more than 3 inches from any enemy units at the start of your movement phase, instead of making a normal move, you can remove it from the battlefield and set it up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from enemy units. Now, because that happens at the start of your movement phase, if he's your general, you can choose the order of things that happen at the start of your hero phase. And we talked about at the beginning, the command ability that you get from being in the Nighthaunt Legion. Lets you teleport one of your friendly units to your general within 12 inches of him. So this is where the maneuverability comes from the army, and it's fantastic for grabbing objectives late game, for getting in your opponent's backline if they've left a gap. There's been so many games where I've caused people to sweat just by putting him somewhere, just to make them concerned about what might be showing up there, and it forces them to think about spreading their army too thin. He's still got your ethereal rule as well, which is always good. He's got the Dreadblade rule, which is kind of cool. Add 1 to your damage characteristic if you make a charge, and if you've not charged, you get an extra attack. So kind of makes that 3 attacks becoming 2 damage pretty good for taking out an enemy hero as well if they're sitting on the backboard. And you've also got the Curse of Loyalty. So if you're near your friendly Knight of Shrouds, you get to reroll wound rolls of 1 for attacks with the Dreadblade. So you do get a bit of reliable damage coming out of him if you want to send him in as a scalpel, for instance, to go and try and take out an enemy hero. That combos kind of well with the Slither artifact as well. So it's basically one of those ones where you choose an enemy model within 3 inches after you pile in, and if you roll a dice that's better than their wounds characteristic, that model's slain. So that works really well for just go for that big roll to try and kill an enemy hero. If not, you've got some good combat when you've made that charge, or you can try and split apart enemy units. if you make the 10+ charge, because that artifact works each time you pile in, you can potentially split up a unit pretty significantly in the middle of it, make it really difficult for them to pile back into coherency. So I just really love the Dribbly Harrow. He's so good for 90 points. I don't understand why he came down 10 points in the handbook. We're just going to keep quiet about that one.
I think when I hear about that, I think that most armies that you don't have anyone who has teleport shenanigans doesn't get to teleport a hero with the unit. So that's pretty rare, that ability. The only thing that I can think of like that would be the Soul Scream Bridge that doesn't have the range that you just talked about. And that's an 80-point spell currently. So the fact that you're getting a hero for 90 points that obviously has the other hero benefits and can't come back at you, given that an endless spell, you could use the bridge to kind of, your opponent could teleport to you. Not a bad investment.
Yeah, and he is then your hero there to give you the re-rolling charges if you need to try and get those 10+ charges.
That's what when I've played my Gloomspite Gits and I've teleported my Grots and hell, I've had a unit of Fanatics hiding in there. That's 6-inch charge. If I don't roll that 6, I'm screwed. I've got no way of re-rolling that. The fact that you've got a hero and knowing you've got a CP up your sleeve, that consistency is pretty high, and you get to do what you want to do. So sounds like a pretty good 90 points to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so repeatable. Like you can teleport every turn with that character, and even if you kill the unit that he's with, he can teleport to the opposite side of the board and then summon a totally different unit, because the unit doesn't have to start nearby. And so it comes to him. So even if you kill the unit that he's teleported to one side, he can then just flip over to the other side of the board. So you've got to cover all your objectives all the time, and he just adds so much sort of versatility to your list. You
kind of tap into the Seraphon teleporting abilities. Most armies, once they're on the board, you're on the board, but Seraphon's like the only one that can kind of jump around. That is, for an army that doesn't have the movement shenanigans, very, very hard to keep chasing across the board.
Yeah, for sure.
Nick, what any other hero choices stand out for you?
I'm going to talk about my favorite hero. He's definitely not the best, but he's the most baller of the lot, and that is Kurdos Valentian, the Craven King. This guy is so much fun, and
no one talks about him. Everyone's about Alinda. I want to hear the spruik about Kurdos.
So Kurdos, he's this old dude. He just sits on his chair. He flies around on his hover wheelchair thing. He's got this massive ass mace that just reminds me of the King Leoric from Diablo 3 and Diablo 2. And he's just this massive big guy. And he's got his handlers, so his spirit hosts attacks, and so that's 6 attacks with Spectral Grasp, so 6 is immortals. He's got, if I cannot rule, none shall rule. So at the start of the enemy hero phase, after the opposing player receives their command point for that turn, roll a dice on a 5+, subtract 1 from the enemy player's command points to a minimum of 0, and you receive 1 command point. So I think towards the start of AOS 2, this was cool, because like pretty much people only ever got command points for the start of their turn. Nowadays, people are generating a lot more of them with the battalions, and they're buying them and stuff like that. So I'd love it if it was like every time they try and use a command point, he can steal it and then they can't use it. Because
like an anti Aether Quartz brooch.
Yeah, exactly. Because at the end of the day, a lot of Age of Sigmar games only go for 2 or 3 turns, and so you're only kind of proccing this a couple of times. The chances, like sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes you steal their turn 1 command point and they just look at it and go, well, that's fucked. Like I really needed that. So, so sometimes it's amazing, but it is only on a 5+. But then he's got Soul Crushing Smite. So if the unmodified wound roll for an attack made with the Spectral Scepter is a 6, that attack has a damage characteristic of D6 instead of D3. And he can suffer no rival. He can reroll failed hit rolls for attacks made against the enemy general. But the Spectral Scepter has 5 attacks. He's got hitting on 3s, it's wounding on 3s, E3, D6 on when you roll a 6. You can potentially buff that for rerolling 1s to hit. You can buff it for +1 to wound with characters that you're probably taking already. And so his damage output can actually get pretty ludicrous for just a little guy on a 50 mil base. I've certainly had games where you don't want to commit him because you want him there for his command point ability, but when you do commit him, sometimes he just absolutely destroys stuff.
Yeah.
The only issue with him, and the reason people don't take him realistically, is he's a lot of points. I can't remember. I think he might have dropped in the new
200.
Yeah, he was 220. He is now 200. So he's probably it's closer, but it's still I've seen him used in Legion of Grief as a another command point generator, because Legion of Grief list can generate an absurd amount of command points. But maybe if just a little bit of a buff to him. But he's my favorite. I think he's great. The model's sick, and it's just very strong.
Yeah, you can take him in Legion of Grief with the Vassal of the Craven King as well, which gives you another command point on a 5-up. Then you can take the Aether Quartz Brooch. So you just really like stacking on those commander points, which are useful in the Legion of Grief because you want them to bring back your units.
Or even if you're putting all your dudes in all your models in the underworld, and then just go for those reroll charges, and there's a lot of good reason to use those command points in Nighthaunt.
Yep.
Ash, what's another hero choice from yourself?
There's so many to choose from. We've sort of already talked a little bit about the Guardian of Souls and the Knight of Shroud. So those guys are super useful. They're pretty straightforward the way that you use those ones. So I don't think we need to talk about them too much, I guess. There's probably just two others that I'd want to pull out. Probably the main one that I'd want to pull out would be the Briar Queen. So this is the Night Vault Warband leader, and she's one of the more valuable units that I had in my CanCon army from last year. So she's a spellcaster. She's got a range threat as well. So she's got 10-inch range, 3 attacks, 3s/3s, -3 rend, 1 damage, which that 3 rend is pretty good. It catches people off guard a little bit.
Would that be pretty useful right now with OBR coming in with Petrifix with 2+, 3+ armor saves?
Not really, no. It's good. The Rend 3 is good, but only 3 attacks doing 1 damage. You're not going to kill enough of them to make a difference. It might be good for taking out the Liege Cavalos, who goes to a 2+ save when he's in that Legion. But even then, you're only up to a 5-up save on him. He might just roll hot and save them anyway.
I'll be honest, I only heard Rend 3. I didn't hear the 1 damage.
Yeah.
I just heard Rend 3.
Like, wait, what?
What?
So yeah, she's all right. She's got like a little bit better than a regular wizard in combat as well. So she's got 1 attack, 3s/3s instead of 4s/3s, Ren 2 instead of Ren 1, and D3 damage. So she can punch a little bit in combat as well. But the reason you take her for is the War Scroll spell that you get with her. So it's called Howling Vortex. So it's got a casting value of 7, so relatively high, a little bit difficult to cast, but worth it when you get it off. So if successfully cast, you pick a point on the battlefield within 18 inches of your caster that's visible to them. Then you roll 2d6 for each enemy unit within 6 inches of that point. So your range threat is 24 inches. If the roll is greater than the value of that unit's move characteristic, or the roll is a double, that unit suffers a mortal wound, but more importantly, its movement characteristic is halved until the caster's next hero phase. So if you get given the first turn, or you take the first turn, generally in a lot of the scenarios from the new General's Handbook, you're 18 inches away or 21.5 inches away. So you can hit a quite significant part of your opponent's army with this spell in the first turn. And just halving their movement for their turn and then the double turn is so useful because it allows you to pin that part of the army in place. So the mortal wound is kind of an extra thing. You don't really, it's kind of okay because an arcane bolts 1 mortal wound anyway. And this is in an area of 6 inches from that point. So you've kind of got a 12-inch bubble that you're doing a mortal wound to. And rolling 2d6 against the move characteristic, a lot of units are movement 4. Even though they have ways of getting faster, it's pretty reliable to get that movement debuff onto them. So you can combo that with things like your shackles to halve the movement again. I was very surprised that I didn't see her allied into more Nagash lists, because the Legions of Nagash have a spell where you can halve the movement of units near a terrain piece as well. So you can halve it. So you can get a movement 6 unit down to movement 1. A movement like 14. Like if you can roll a double with this one spell, movement 14 unit can go down to movement 1.5 inches. Which is significant because it just controls the flow of the battlefield, and then you've got that room to set up your units close to the enemy with your heroes close behind and get those overlapping buffs in range. So yeah, she's super good.
It's a nice cheeky spell.
It's a little bit confusing with her though, because her points were 150 points in the old handbook. They've been changed to 180 points in the new handbook. They didn't get a star next to them, and none of the War Scroll building apps have been updated with that new point set. So maybe with your overreaching listener base, Coach, we can get some clarity on that from the guys over in the UK.
I'll put a phone call in right now.
Thanks for that. Yeah,
just speed dial them. They're at work now. It's actually a work time for England.
Perfect. Just
hello, Ben. Right now. Ben, this is the coach.
Yeah.
It's C. I don't even have to say coach. I just said C. Cool. The Briar Queen, good pickup. Because most of the time the Underworld's warbands are pretty rubbish when it comes to translating into Sigmar. So interesting call out there. Maybe we'll do a bit of like an elevator pitch. Like, what do we think when we come to the Can Wraith at that 60-point level?
Trash.
Bad.
The only times I've really liked the Can Wraith is I've got a couple of spare points and I just need another hero to keep my ward save kind of buffs in range. Otherwise, I've never really seen a lot of use for the Can Wraith.
Yeah, I think this army is so top heavy already. You want to be filling out your hero slots with the useful heroes, and there's so many useful heroes in there. I think the Can Wraith, there's just not really the room for him. And whenever you've got those 60 points spare, you're probably better off putting an endless spell anyway.
That was literally giving me my next question. I've got 60 points left. Are you going endless spell? Are we going the Can Wraith? And you're saying Can Wraith is not getting picked.
Yep.
Sorry, Can Wraith. The Dreadblade Harrow, we've definitely talked about. Our Guardian of Souls with the Nightmare Lantern.
Oh, the Lantern. You can't take him anymore, can you?
The Lantern you can, not the the Mortality Glass is the one that's disappeared.
Yeah, so the Lantern is he's just got a generic sort of healing spell. He's got an aura effect of +1 to wound, which is strong. We've sort of talked about him already. He's one of your only spellcasters. He's a good solid pick. You can put an artifact on him. There's nothing overly wrong with him.
The artifact that works as well with that is there's one of the lanterns. I think it's the Lantern of Nagashazar. Gives you an extra 3 models back whenever you cast his spell. So you can combo that. If you're going with the Chain Guard, you're getting 2d6 plus 3 models back every time you get that spell off, which can be pretty strong.
And we'll get to artifacts pretty soon, so we can talk about customizing this type of stuff. Alinda, our Mortarch. I see her a lot on the tabletop. Curious to hear from your thoughts. Is she worth the 220?
I think so. 2-cast wizard. I've not taken her as my generally, so I don't get the use out of her command ability, but she's a good threat to have on the table because of the amount of mortal wounds that she can put out. So she's got a couple of abilities that do that. She's got the Grave's Hands of Time, which is once per battle, you can inflict d6 mortal wounds on an enemy hero within 6 inches. She's also got Lifting the Veil, where you pick an enemy unit within 12 inches and roll a dice on a 2-up. It does that many mortal wounds. So you can do some significant mortal wound damage. You've got the Wail of the Damned, which can do some more mortal wounds in the shooting phase, and she can run and do that because it's an ability. That happens in the shooting phase. And then her spell's fantastic as well. Grief Stricken, casting value of 7 again. That's the problem with this one. It's pretty difficult to cast, but if successfully cast, you pick an enemy unit within 18 inches, and until your next hero phase, you subtract 1 from hit rolls. for attacks made by that unit, and add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target that unit. So they're at -1 to hit, you're at +1 to hit, and that combos really well when you're getting those 10 plus charges off, and combos really well with one of the spells from the lore that you're going to take every time as well.
Yeah. And just I might just pull us back here for a second. Because of the mortality glass, I know this might come to a surprise to people. Now you said that you can't take the Guardian of Souls with the mortality glass. What is making you say that?
So in the new General's Handbook, they put in some rules about which units you could and couldn't use and when they had to have been published. And I just think they didn't put him in the list of units for the Nighthaunt. So it was something that you could use before. It was a really odd one. It was a store anniversary thing. They never published the rules anywhere. You could only ever get them in the actual box with the model. You could only buy the model, on one particular day in a given store. So I don't like that way of distributing the rules and stuff like that. I don't even think it was in the app.
No, it was never in the app. I remember when I ran a tournament, I had to ask for a copy of the War Scroll and the points.
Yeah. I think it's a really crappy way to release rules. And I really thought, the whole thing with Age of Sigmar when they first brought it out was all the War Scrolls are free. You can always look at all the War Scrolls. Well, this one wasn't. So from that perspective, I'm actually okay with it not being allowed, but it was actually really good.
Yeah, I think so. Basically, the change was I think the model came out after General's Handbook 2018, so the points that came with the box was legal. Now that we're in 2019 General's Handbook, because the points aren't there, it is now no longer usable in match play. Now, if you're playing with your mates at your local game store, or you even speak to a tournament organizer, they may allow it. But the general overarching rule is that there is no current points for it, so it is not to be selected. And nor can you bring it into your War Scroll builder. I don't know if it's in a ZR. So that's the logic behind the mortality glass.
Yeah.
And it's a real pity because it's actually referenced in the Nighthaunt battle tome. Like there's one of its rules is referenced in one of the battalions, and it's like when I first got the battle tome, I'm like, what is that referencing? I've never seen this thing before. And then they brought it out, and it's like, well, it's just really odd. Why didn't they put him? If they knew they were going to release it, sure, make it hard to get, but put it in the battle tome.
Yeah, I agree. You got a couple of other hero choices. We've got the Spirit Torment, generally 120 points.
Yeah, I think that's what I was talking about before. He's good.
We've got the Tomb Banshee, so 80 points for a nice little scream. I think it's a bravery-based scream.
Yeah, good in Legion of Grief, but not really in Nighthaunt.
Yeah, just sort of back on what I was saying before, everything's bravery is too high. It just doesn't do any real damage on average against a lot of units. So it's no point putting the points into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cool model, but I've never really used that often. I think that's all the hero choices.
Just Ryken the Grimhail is the only one we've missed there.
Yes, of course.
So he's pretty good. 14-inch move and fly because he's ethereal. So he's got fly twice. He's pretty fly. He's got 7 wounds and a 4-up save. He's got 4 attacks at 2-inch range with his Fell Reaper. They're 4s by 3s -1, 2 damage, but they can reroll hits against 5 or more models, and any hit roll of a 6 does 2 mortal wounds. So sending him into a unit like a 5-man of Judicators on the backfield objective or that sort of thing is where he really thrives. But his ability, the Corpse Candles, is super useful. So in your hero phase, before this model attempts to cast a spell, he's a 1-cast wizard, by the way, you can say that it will snuff out a Corpse Candle. If you do so, you pick either this model or an enemy model within 12 inches of the caster. And the model suffers 1 mortal wound. Now, if the mortal wound was suffered by an enemy model, you add 1 to the casting roll. And if the mortal wound was suffered by this model, you add 3 to the casting roll. Now, I've had a few times where I've tried to do this on himself, and then he's rolled that 6 on his Deathless Spirit saves. And so because he hadn't suffered that wound, you don't get the +3. But when you do get the +3, it makes it really reliable for casting some of those really valuable spells. And I think this kind of will go pretty nicely with the next step in the process of building a list, which is choosing your spells for the wizards, because there's one of the spells in particular that is, I think it's one of the most important spells to be putting in your list these days, because it allows you to work with those multiple small units and bring that force to bear against some of those larger enemy units that would otherwise control the board from you.
All right, well, let's close off the heroes and let's get into the other unit choices, and then we can go into the spells and artifacts that Ash has alluded to. So we'll go over really quickly because we've already talked a little bit about this, which is your one and only behemoth choice, which is the Black Coach. Now I know the Lord of Death Deke himself loves running 2. I think it's a bit excess, but I have played against him where he's run 2 Black Coaches. They've powered up quite quickly in 2 turns and have been a nightmare to play against. What are our thoughts on the Black Coach?
Love the coach.
Thank you. I like you as well. So, Black Coach, right? Why?
I'm ambivalent on the Black Coach.
So, Nick, why do you like the Black Coach?
It's fast. It is, and it just projects a threat range beyond a lot of things in the book. So its base movement is 14. There's an item that we'll talk about later that can give it +3 movement, so that's up to 17, and you've got a 50% chance of getting to level 2 in turn 1 in the first battle round, which means it can run and charge. So with a command point, then you're up to 23 before you've even rolled your charge. So it can absolutely, pardon the pun, fly across the board. And it's difficult to use, and I think Ash will back me on this. It's difficult to use. You've got to, it's only got 12 wounds. It's only got a 4-up save. It's often away from your characters, which means it's not going to have that 6-up death save, and it's not a character itself, as previously discussed. And so it's fragile, but it can heal D3 turns. So if you can keep it out on the flanks and sort of in behind the enemy army, keep it away from their big units. It's going to chip off little units on the flanks. It's going to contest, not so much contest objectives, but it'll just harass stuff. It's just this amazing sort of harassment piece in the early mid game, where it'll take a couple wounds a turn, but then it'll heal D3 from its level 1 ability. And then when it gets up to sort of level 4 and 5, the fourth level is it can retreat and charge in the same turn. And then the Witchfire is level 5, where it does impact hits and stuff like that. So at that point it starts putting a bit of damage in. It's retreating and charging. It's moving 20 inches a turn and stuff like that. So it's actually just sort of flipping all around the table, just kind of chipping in where it's needed. It's hard to pin down. So yeah, I think it's a really strong unit from that perspective, but then occasionally it'll just get charged by some big behemoth that has lots of high damage attacks, and let's just get taken off.
Yeah, it's a good distraction piece. I generally do that. I'll throw it across the board first turn into like a flank of my opponent's army, and generally it'll get killed in the first turn, maybe the second turn if they get the double and need it. But in doing so, it's controlled their movement for that turn. And it's not an essential piece in the way that the army controls objectives either. So because none of the objectives are behemoth controlled anymore, you're literally just working on your battle line, your heroes, and models on objectives. So losing one behemoth isn't a big deal really in the grand scheme of things. And it still will do a little bit of damage on the turn that it goes in as well.
It's also got a massive base, so occasionally you can just block out a huge portion of the board. You can use it to kind of protect your other units. I've certainly had games where I've sort of set my units up sort of 2 or 3 models wide if I'm sort of looking to play defensively. So I've got 3 units of tough troops that are sort of 2-3 models wide and then sort of 5 models deep with a coach next to them. And you're actually you don't get any surface area on any of these units. And so you can't, because they're relatively tough, you just can't kill them all.
That's the other thing I've done as well is I'll often use the Black Coach as the screen, which seems counterintuitive, but because it's got that massive base, you can get a large portion of the frontage of your army covered up while still having your army within 3 inches of the enemy unit that charged you. So I've had a game, one of the games at the Anzac Cup, where it was against the Flesh Eater Courts with the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, which does horrific damage. And of course, that it moved across the board, killed the coach, but then it was in combat with 2 units of Bladegeist Revenants and a unit of Grimghast Reapers. And so it took me 2 turns, but in 2 turns, I still took it off. So that kind of thing as well, where I've lost 1 model that's probably a good trade for that kind of damage back.
Yeah. I think if you look at the raw damage output, the sort of base stats of the coach, you compare it to its points cost, and then you compare it to other things in other battle tomes, it doesn't look great, and it doesn't really compare. But if you use it right, if you use the speed, you can kind of do enough with it to make it worth it. Is it going to be potentially the most competitive choice at the end of the day? It's probably not in my most competitive lists, but the model's cool. I enjoy the way it plays. I enjoy playing with it, so I do tend to run it.
I imagine it's one of these units that you need to really learn its potential when it's at its lowest level, and then what it's like at the maximum level. Don't run the Black Coach into a unit thinking that it's at level 4 or level 5 abilities, and it's not there yet, because I imagine the potential, and when I've played against them many times, what a Black Coach level 1 and a Black Coach level 4 can do, very different things. That's just from my side of the fence.
Yeah, it's all about that. It's all about that second level and probably the third level are probably the really important ones. Level 1 you tend to always have. Level 2 is the big one. Reroll 1 hit rolls of 1, which it's got a lot of attack rolls, so that helps. And then it can run and charge. And then level 3 is the impact hits D3 mortal wounds on a 2+. So that's probably generally where it's at, and they're the probably more important ones.
Yep. So you're really going for level 3.
If you do manage to survive as well to level 4, you get the retreat and charge. So retreat, run, and charge. So you can be back to moving really fast across the board and zipping around.
You got a couple of other unit choices. So we've talked about the Hex Wraiths. We've kind of said they're all right. Some situational builds, they can be really good. Otherwise, so-so.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, just kind of summarizing. Pardon?
Like them in the new battalion.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're taking the new battalion in the White Dwarf, definitely up. We have our Miamon Banshees. For 70 points, you get 4 models. Do we like the Banshees?
Do we like them? Yes. Do we run them?
I mean, they sold out from when they very first came out. They sold out for weeks. People were talking about them till they're blue in the face. I cannot say I've ever played against a Miamon Banshee.
I think I've got 24 or 30 of them.
Exactly. My exact point.
They're okay. They're good in Legion of Grief, I think, because the issue with the Miamon Banshees is that they're only 1 wound each, and you can only take a maximum unit of 12. So in Nighthaunt Allegiance, they're just going to die too quick to get much use out of them. But if you're in Legion of Grief, you can take that max unit of 12. You can stack on the buff for the extra attack from Dispelling an Endless Spell. You can get an extra attack from United Shrouds on Steed. You can throw them into your opponent with 3 attacks each, doing 4s and 3s, -2 D3 damage. And probably wipe a unit, lose your unit back in return the next turn, but then you can bring it back onto the board. So I think that's where you get the utility out of this unit. They're good for dispelling as well, but their dispel range is only 18 inches. So it does make it a little bit more limited than the regular caster. You can't generally use them as a dispel piece in the first turn.
Yeah, so Ashley's hit the nail on the head. It's all about Legion of Grief because you can just run them forward. If they die, they die, but you can still use those unbinds. But then you get them back. And yeah, there's most of the Legion of Grief lists that I've run. I've run like 2 units of Banshees and really enjoyed it. So yeah, I like them, but I don't run them at Nighthaunt.
Yep, fair enough. Grimghast Reapers, we spoke earlier. They were the boogeyman at the start of the year. Their points went up a little bit. Are they so they used to be 140, now 160 for 10. Are they still worth 160 points, or do you think that 20-point jump for every 10 models made them not as good? Nick, you were a big Grimghast man.
Yeah, like I used them as minimum battle line in Nighthaunt, and I never took. So I think I had 2 units of 10, and that just happened to be the way the points worked. Sometimes it was 1 unit of 10 and 2 units of 10 chain rasp. So I didn't really even like them for 140 points in Nighthaunt. At a 160, I'm more sketchy on them, and I start looking at things like hex rates. But as we said, you probably just take the 3 chain rasps for 240. In Legions, yeah, maybe in a big unit, but yeah, it's a big points increase. I think they were too strong in that Nagash Legions list, but I think a lot of that came from Nagash and not so much from the Grims.
Yeah.
Nighthaunt copping a plus 20 points on this was really harsh, I think. Which is really, really unnecessary. They weren't, killing the world in Nighthaunt, not by a long shot.
Yeah, it was always the one command point to bring back 30 Grimghast Reapers that grinded my gears. For 160 points, I still think they're viable. But yes, absolutely, Nighthaunt did cop the abuse from Legions of Nagash. I don't think you guys deserve that point increase. Hopefully that rebalances in 6 months' time when the new update comes out. Cool. All right, actually got nothing else to say on that one. We've got the Glaive Wraith Stalkers, 4 for 60s. Is that the same type of thing with the Miamon Banshees?
Trash.
Yeah. Do they suffer from that exact same situation, that there's 60 points for 4 models?
Yeah, similar idea that you can't take the big units of them, but more significantly, they fill the same role that Blade Geists do, but Blade Geists are better point for point.
Yeah, they straight up suck. They don't offer anything that other units don't have.
Is there any reason you would take them that you could see?
Because you like the models.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than that.
And the models suck.
All right, so we'll just
their rules are bad and their models are bad, and they make me feel bad.
All right, everyone, go get your black Textar, put a line through your Glaive Wraith Stalkers. That unit doesn't exist
Rip that
anymore.
page out of the book.
Just doesn't exist.
There's a reason every single start collecting box or discount box that has Nighthaunt in them has these models in them, because they ain't selling any other way.
All right, if you're looking for a really cheap army, there's a way to build out your force for a couple of dollars. One of my favorite units, since I've started playing against you guys pretty recently, is the Harridans. They've really impressed me. Are they really good, or am I just really unlucky when I play against Nighthaunt?
They're okay. I think they're too expensive. How many points are there? They're 80 points for 5.
5 for 80 or 20 for 280.
So they have a similar attack profile to something like your what's the Sylvaneth unit? The scary Sylvaneth ladies.
Your Tree Revs, Spite Revs.
Spite Revenants, that's the one.
Revs.
So 3 attacks each. Pretty reliable hit and wound roll with some damage output, but those ones are 60 points. These ones are 80. So you're kind of paying the extra points for the extra movement and the fly and the ethereal, but I don't think you're getting the value out of it as much. Yeah, I really hate the models. That's why I don't take it. But I justify it by saying that they're not good.
Okay, all right. Nick, do you feel the same?
Yeah, if everything bravery was lower.
Mind you, when I played against them last, I was running bravery 4 grots.
Yeah, that helps.
It's a big difference to their damage output with the Shriek, but not to their toughness, but just stuff doesn't have bravery 5 or less. It's just there's just not very much of it in the entire game, and you just your army, sure.
Both my free people and my grots are bravery 5 and 4.
The thing is, the grots you'll need one to hit them, so you're just both just as bad as each other, right? But yeah, if there was a way to get lots of bravery debuffs in the list, maybe they're viable. But yeah, The
All right,
models.
so if I was playing Stormcast or I was playing, I don't know, Demons, they wouldn't be nearly as good. But since I'm playing Bravery 4 and Bravery 5 armies, they are exceptional.
Could be that swapping in the stats, yeah.
Yeah,
I
probably.
think so. Your Chain Ghasts,
I love these guys.
two for 70.
Yeah. So the points doesn't really translate to how impactful they are in the game, because they're a cheaper Spirit Torment for your Blade Geist Revenants to be running around with. They've also got this super ability where in combat they get the number of attacks for enemy models within 2 inches, and then you can allocate those attacks into whatever enemy model you want that's also within 2. So say if you charge a horde of 40 skeletons and get 20 attacks out of them, you can put all 20 of those attacks into the Necromancer standing next to them. So it's pretty useful for that kind of thing. I've used it pretty well against things like Arcan standing behind a screen of zombies. Like there's a lot of good uses for that ability. And when
Sorry, can you rewind? Explain that one again.
Yeah, so I'll read it out for you. So it's called Sweeping Blows, the ability. So the attack's characteristic of the Ghast Flail's melee weapon is equal to the number of enemy models within 2 inches of the attacking model when the number of attacks made with the weapon is determined. So the way that works is you count up the enemy models within 2 inches, and then you choose who you're attacking. So that could be a hero next to the unit that you've gotten all those attacks from, and then you can make those attacks against that hero. And because you've only got 2 models, 32 mil bases, they fly. If you get a 10+ charge, you can potentially get like between 40 and 50 attacks out of these 2 guys into an enemy hero. It's pretty good.
So awesome for hordes, maybe not as good for elite against an elite opponent.
Yeah, but they do have some rend in there as well with their shooting. So -2 rend on their 15-inch shooting attacks. So that's got some value as well against the more elite units.
Yeah.
I think you're mostly taking them for another link in the chain buff, but if they're going to do some ancillary damage, why not?
Yeah.
I think the final unit we haven't spoken about would be the Glade Geist Revenants, which is your 5 for 90, or you get 20 for 320 points. Blade Geist? Blade Geist?
Why these didn't get a drop in the General's Handbook is beyond me. Realistically, they're the best unit in the book, I think.
Why they didn't get an increase is another question.
Well, I don't know if they needed an increase. I don't think in the scheme of like the whole of Age of Sigmar, are they a game-breaking unit? No, but they are just, it'll bend. No, they do a bit of everything. Like going through their war scroll, they where did I put it? There it is. So obviously they can fly. Their movement 8. They've got a 4-up save. They're generally going to have a 6-up, so they're tough because they're ethereal. They've got quality attacks, 2 attacks each, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, rend 1, damage 1. That becomes 3 attacks on the charge, which they do plenty of. They get better rerolls to hit with Spirit Torments and Chain Ghasts that are nearby, and they can retreat and charge in the same turn, and that ability is absolutely next level, and it's what absolutely takes them, like makes them a really good, decent unit. Is you can charge into stuff. If they get stuck in combat with stuff all game, they're gonna drop because they're expensive. The max unit size is 20. They will drop, but if you can, charge them in sort of 2 units of 10 into a unit, fight it, and then the next turn, if you get that double, you can just kind of spread them out to the sides and re-engage and get favorable angles on stuff. It makes a huge difference. The amount of times my opponents have forgotten that I can do that and thought I was pinned down, and off they went into another unit, into the characters. You charge into someone's army, you hit their main wall, you hurt it because they're strong, and then the next turn you just charge because you can fly, you've got movement 8, you just hop over their units and then you charge into their characters.
I was going to say units like this that can do that ability often don't have the fly characteristic. So the fact that you can fly and the retreat and charge just makes a huge difference to leap over and steal objectives, to get to those juicy center and take out those heroes, or, get out of that unwinnable matchup and get to something a bit more interesting. That's massive.
Yeah. And they just, because they're such high quality and the keys, they're only 1 wound. Like some of the other units in the book that are decent are 2 wounds or they're 3 wounds, and they're hard to heal. They're hard to raise. These guys are only 1 wound. If you hit them with 5d3 worth of raises, you're getting 10 of them back pretty on average. That's 10 very high quality guys, 10 very high quality models. And again, we talk about you can string them along in a line. So you go in, you engage, you've got 20 of them, you lose, say, 10 of them in your opponent's turn, and then if you get the next turn, when you get the turn back, you can raise, say, 10 of them back in a big long line off somewhere else. Then you retreat 8 inches, and that line's moved another 8 inches towards where you want to go. Then you're making another charge with them. You get really good concaves on stuff, really good angles. They reward good play. They give you opportunities to sort of technically outmaneuver an opponent, and there's something different that the rest of the list doesn't have. And almost every single one of my lists has 30 of these guys in it.
3 units of 10, or are you talking
generally
20 and a 10?
Generally a 20 and a 10 in the Shroud Guard.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. Sounds like I guess it's the behemoth of your army. It's that really elite, powerful force, that bubble, but the flexibility it has is pretty remarkable. And you got 20 wounds for 320. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you guys want to add on the units? I haven't missed anything. Can you guys I don't want to get this wrong, but can you guys bring in the Mongol from Forge World?
You can, yeah. You can bring in the Mongol. I've not actually played with this model. I've played against it before the Battle Tome came out, but I believe it got a change in its War Scroll since then. I think it's okay. 10 wounds, 4+ save with the Ethereal, obviously. Starts out with 8 attacks at 2-inch range, 3s and 3s, -1, 2 damage. So you get some decent damage out of it. And I think pretty quick with 12-inch move. It heals wounds a little bit. It's got the Frightful Touch, so each time you roll a 6 to hit, it does 2 more wounds as well. It's okay, and you subtract 1 from hit rolls when you're attacking it as well. So I think it's kind of plays a similar role to the Black Coach, and I think it's not too dissimilar in points. So it's a kind of a distraction piece. It's good for holding the enemy up. It can dish out a little bit of damage here and there. I think it doesn't have as flexible options late game as the Black Coach has if it survives, but it's just always there as that -1 to hit. It's pretty solid in combat.
Cool. I remember it being used back in the day. I just wanted to call out because it is a model that's available through Forge World. It's called the Mongol. It is a good model, but you're 100% right. It probably fits that role between the Black Coach. I think it's about the 300-point range. So check it out. It might be an interesting way to put something into your list. Yeah. You guys have 2 ally choices. It's your Death Lords and your Soul Blights. Is there anything that you would bring in from either of these allies, or do you guys just not have any points to bring in stuff?
Yeah, I really like a Vampire Lord. So he's, I think, 120 points. He gives you some healing. He comes with some healing. He comes with a +1 attack upgrade that you can stack with the other +1 attack from the Knight of Shrouds. So yeah, he's a general good support character. Okay, you don't get a spell with him because he casts a spell, but he's only got Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield. But yeah, I like the Vampire Lord just as a little support character.
Yeah,
I would agree actually.
Yeah, I think he's really good. The other one that I would consider as well, I think it's called the Coven Throne, is not too bad in the Nighthaunt. So it's got a good spell on its War Scroll. I'm just pulling it up now because I remembered it, but I'm not able to find it momentarily. There it is. So the spell on its War Scroll is called Beguile. So it's a casting value of 6. If it's successfully cast, you pick an enemy unit within 12 inches of the caster that's visible to them and roll 3 dice. If the total is higher than that unit's bravery, then until your next hero phase, the caster can't be selected as the target of any attacks made by that unit. So that's a good, a good strong 12 wound hero that you can put onto an objective in some of those hero-based scenarios where Nighthaunt would otherwise be lacking. It has also got a good command ability as well, which works well with your Nighthaunt units. So you can pick a friendly death unit within 12 inches of it, and you can reroll hit, wound, and save rolls of 1 for that unit until your next hero phase. So if you have it following along behind, for example, one of those units of Bladegeist Revenants, you can get them on 3s rerolling 1s by 3s rerolling 1s, and then a 4+ save rerolling 1s as well, which is pretty strong.
Yeah, I like it. The only other call out I'd make on the vampire is you can choose a vampire that has wings so it can fly. And the other thing I really like about it is it has a chalice. So once per game, you can heal at D6 wounds. So it's a pretty little handy piece, but it doesn't get you deathless save because it's an ally.
Yeah, correct. But it just kind of brings along these self-contained things that, it doesn't get the allegiance abilities, but it has raising built in, summoning built in, it has its healing built in, it has its buff built into it on the War Scroll. So good solid unit. Arcane's the other option, although has he changed much with the Bone Reapers?
His War Scroll definitely got rewritten.
He now brings back 3 models into friendly units when he reses them, so it's not D3 anymore, which is super good.
D3 roll before, wasn't it?
Yeah, true. Actually, yeah.
He's a three spellcaster now instead of 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he doesn't know the spells of Death Wizards nearby, and he doesn't get a spell from the lore, so he'll just be casting his War Scroll spell, then Mystic Shield, Arcane Bolt.
Unless you're playing in the realms. If you play in the realms, you get those extra spells. But yes, you probably don't have as many.
Yeah, he's okay. I don't know that I would take him at his new points cost as well. Probably.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't take him, given the main reason you wanted him was to cast spells. So you'd take a couple of spellcasters that would generate spells for him to cast. Because Cursing is good, but it's not the best spell ever.
And it got changed. Curse of Years got changed a little bit as well. So 1s do fail.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crap.
So there's no automatic deletes. Sorry, Michael Thompson, if you're watching this, or Clint Mallet, who have deleted my units twice. Yeah. That's not this show. So that's your ally choices. Pretty cool that you guys have some interesting choices, but I think you guys have already highlighted the importance of the synergies in your battalions, and when you're probably looking at some of those other choices, it might be hard to justify some of these. You wouldn't want to spend too much on an ally pool.
Yeah, something to consider, I guess, if you were doing a larger points level, if you're doing 2,500 points, you could take Catacross as an ally. And we know that he's super strong. I don't know how he would go in the Nighthaunt Legion, but he would plug in that gap where you don't have a resilient hero. Just having that 3-up save, like a bunch of attacks on his profile. I'd have to look into see whether that would actually work well. I literally just put in the keyword to see what would actually go into the Death Lords these days, and interesting to see that he could be in there at that larger points level.
Yeah, I'd not considered that.
Are we happy? So I think we've talked about all of our unit choices, which is pretty cool. We've talked allies, we've talked battalions, we've talked all of the different unit choices. I guess it's now about and obviously you've got your choices around your mercenary companies as well. If you want to take a necromancer and skeletons or gargants, or would you guys ever tap into the mercenary choices?
I straight up don't know what they do.
So the necromancer one's the one that you do, because you normally can't ally in death mages into a Nighthaunt army. Being able to ally in a necromancer for the Pylon and Attack Twice spell that he's got in his War Scroll is super good, and he can literally just come in on his own. He doesn't have to bring any skeletons alongside him to be a part of that mercenary company. What you would need to do is probably build in some ways of recovering the command points that you've lost, though, because you do want to be able to teleport with your Dribbly Harrow. So I'd be looking at probably either taking Kurdos to try and steal your opponent's command points, or putting in the Aether Quartz Brooch to get some of those back.
I don't know. You're like ruining Christmas, but literally going to build those customizations. But no, really good call out, because you do sacrifice your turn 1 command point in order to take a mercenary.
The other way to do it is the Legion of Grief actually gives you access to necromancers as well, and that's probably one of the key advantages.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, really good point. So we've now built our list and we've got some good ideas on the types of units we want to put in. Obviously, the battalions are really going to dictate which units we're going to pick and what heroes are going to buff them, and how, the unit sizes. I guess now we want to start customizing it and fine tuning it and picking some command traits, some artifacts, some spells and endless spells to really hone this list into something that's great. So we've got 6 command traits to choose from. We've got the Hatred of the Living. We've got Terrifying Entity. We have Lingering Spirits. We have Spiteful Spirit, Cloak of Shadows, and Ruler of the Spirit Hosts. Are all of these 6 choices good in your opinions, or is there one or two that really stands out? Ash is shaking his head. Nick's also supporting Ash. Ash is putting his fingers up as 2. Which are the 2 that you call out, and what are they and why?
1.5.
What?
There's
1.5.
There's
All right,
1.5. Yeah.
All right.
So the one is the Ruler of the Spirit Host. That's the one that you go to. So at the start of your hero phase, you can pick a friendly summonable Nighthaunt unit within 9 inches of the general and return D3 slain models to that unit. And that's models. So that's where you can bring back potentially 3 Spirit Hosts, 3 Hex Raids. Even if it's just putting 3 Blade Geist Revenants back into a unit, that's super useful. Just for an ability, you don't have to cast a spell, you don't have to do any dice rolls to make it happen. It just goes off. So that's super good.
Nick, was that one of your ones?
Yeah, that is definitely the one. I don't think I've ever taken not that.
So what's the half?
Yeah.
What's the other one? I'm curious now.
So the half for me is the Cloaked in Shadow. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target the general. I've taken that a few times on my Dribbly Harrow because I find that if I get paired into a shooting matchup, I won't have that maneuverability late game because I'll lose the general. Making him -2 to hit when he's next to another friendly unit is pretty useful. You can make that -3 to hit if you've got the Griff Feather Charm on him as well. So you can get some real resilience just by your opponent not being able to hit him.
And that additional -1 that Ash was talking about is coming from Lookout Sir, which is a rule that if your hero is within 3 of a unit, they are -1 to hit the character, so long as they have under 8 or 10 wounds. I don't remember. It's like so Lookout Sir, look at your rules.
It's actually not a wounds thing. It's as long as they don't have the monster keyword.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other 4.
I'm glad you know.
The other 4 command tracks, 3 of them are combat-based ones. So one's reroll fail to hits against things that don't have death. One of them's like debuffs bravery within 3. The other one's a 5-up mortal wound save in combat only. And then the other one's just +1 wound. So the combat ones, you just don't want your characters in combat. No, they're just not any good in combat. No. So
it's a last resort.
Yeah.
And by the way, thanks Ash for reminding me, because I was remembering the stupidity of War Altars and Hurricanums getting -1 to hit. So you're 100% correct. Good call out. That was stupid.
Thankfully, the Hurricanum's got the rule on its War Scroll that stops you from getting that now. And also, thankfully, they didn't upgrade the War Altar War Scroll, so I still get it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Cauldron of Blood.
Yeah, Cauldron of Blood. Yeah, there's a few of them. Yeah,
it's silly. So the other command traits not that good, or not as good as the 2 that you guys just called out.
No.
Hot garbage, as they would say. You got a spell law. I might just minimize, shorten this up a little bit. So your spell law. So you have 6 spells to choose from the Law of the Underworlds. We have Soul Cage, Spirit Drain, Life Stealer, Reaping Sides, Shade Mist, and Spectral Tether. All good choices, not good choices. Thoughts? Which ones stand out good? Why? Ash?
Yeah, so the standout spell from this spell lore is Soul Cage. So it's a casting value of 6. Generally, they'll put this spell onto Reikenor to make it cast on a 3, because you really want this spell to go off when you need it to happen. So
that's by taking damage against himself and getting the +3.
Doing the candles ability. So if it's successfully cast, you pick an enemy unit within 12 inches of the caster that's visible to them. Until the start of your next hero phase, that unit can't retreat, which is super good for controlling their movement. And then in addition, until the start of your next hero phase, it can't fight in the combat phase until all other enemy units that are eligible to fight have already done so. Now, this has been FAQ'd to say that it fights at the end of the combat phase. So that means that you can charge in with your entire army to kill that unit before it gets to make its attacks. And that's the one way that we have of playing around, aside from rolling 10s on the charges, the other way of playing around the activation wars as they are sort of in the game at the moment.
Yeah, because that 10-inch charge would obviously override Locust because it happens before combat commences.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Nick, a spell from yourself?
Yeah, like going through them, Spirit Drain's not great. It's just, it'll do a few mortals. Life Stealer, again, generally your characters are just getting killed outright. So being able to heal the caster doesn't help a lot of the time. Reaping Scythe is, again, it's on the cast. In combat, you don't want them in combat. Maybe on Rock and already rerolls to hit already.
Yeah.
So Shade Mist is my favorite. Skull Cage, I really like Shade Mist. You don't see it a lot, things interacting with the wound rolls. So it's pick a friendly Nighthaunt unit, wholly within 12 with the caster. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target that unit until the end of your next hero phase. So that works against shooting as well. So that can again, we've talked about the durability of some of the units. This can make a unit very, very hard to kill.
And that's what's made things like the Frost Phoenix so viable, is that -1 to hit bubble. There's not a lot of ways to increase a wound characteristic or a wound roll. There's plenty of ways to get a hit increase, but to wound, so reducing that to wound roll can be massive. And there are some things that trigger on a 6. Not the unmodifieds, but there are some still older war scrolls that you can reduce some of that exploding or mortal wound damage as well through that rule.
Yeah.
The other one that's kind of good is Spectral Tether. It's good for just healing up your heroes. So pick a friendly Nighthaunt hero within 12 of the caster, heal D3 wounds you can allocate to that unit. And that's cast on a 6. So you'll get it off more times than you won't. And putting wounds back on your heroes is always good because they're super valuable in the army.
Awesome. We then have some artifacts of power. You have 6 artifacts of power. Obviously, we've got Malign Sorcery that complements this as well. First off, we have weapons. I know there's some lanterns and some other things, but you've got 6 choices to choose from here. We have the Shadow's Edge. We have the Reaper of Sorrows. We have the Balefire Blade, the Slither, the Headsman Judgment, and then the Shrieking Blade. Are these being chosen as an artifact choice out of your lists? I'm taking your dead silence as no.
No, so the what's the name of the one I like? I mentioned it before. Not so much the weapons, no.
So
Slither.
The only one here that I've used is Slither. So yeah, after you pick the bearer to fight, before they pile in, you can pick an enemy model within 1 inch of the bearer and roll a dice. If the roll is greater than that model's wound characteristic, it's slain. And yeah, because it's before they pile in, you can do that twice if you get your 10+ charge off. I like doing this just to try and either split up an enemy unit with my Dribbly Harrow or just go and try and snipe a hero. I think I've done it where I've charged into a couple of like Moon Clan heroes before and just rolled a 5 up on 2 of the heroes in the 2 activations, and then got to attack into the units next to them afterwards as well. So yeah, that kind of thing is okay if you've got a spare artifact floating around because of all the battalions you're taking.
And is it fair to assume that the reason artifacts of power, weapons of power, aren't that popular is because you guys made a comment earlier that you really don't want your heroes in combat unless it's a last resort? So you're probably better off putting your artifacts in other ways. Yeah. Cool. Just to clarify. Awesome. You do have other ones. So you've got your Relics of the Underworld. So you've got your Cloak of Waxing Moon, the Pendant of the Fellwind, the Dreadbolt Ring, the Mirror of the Screaming Soul, the Midnight Tome, Very, very familiar, that one. And then you've got your familiar. Any of these relics come into your lists?
Yeah, so for me, the Pendant of the Fellwind is in almost all of my lists. So you can add 3 inches to the normal moves made by friendly Nighthaunt units that are wholly within 12 inches of the bearer at the start of that normal move. So the key is it's the start of that normal move, so it's depending on the unit. So you can have whichever character's got this, you can have him on sort of the left-hand side of your army. You can boost the speed on the left hand. They can all move up, and then he can move to the right-hand side and then boost all that, and then they can move up. So you can actually, it's almost, because your army's generally pretty compact, particularly the way I run it, which is a bit more larger units than Ash. You're often affecting almost your whole army with this. It gives that first turn movement ridiculousness on the coach. It means all your line infantry movement 11, which is pretty quick. So plus 3 movement across a whole army is amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's certainly my favorite.
Well, people are choosing the chronomatic cogs to get +2.
Yeah.
So you can do that for free, essentially.
Yeah, without having to cast it as well.
Yeah, and having a hero that has to be within 9 inches to manipulate the cog. So, that's pretty good.
You can do it with the cogs.
Well,
yeah.
Oh, mind blown. Teleport, drop down 9 inches, add +3, add +2. Holy shite, that is an easy charge.
Yeah, it's not
you don't add 2 to the charge.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of the movement as well on the dudes that are on the floor.
Yeah,
that would be awesome. But often you don't need
for a second there.
You don't need to drop down then, because you're looking at movement 13 basic troops that are then charging with +2. So their average distance is 21 inches.
Yeah, or if you go hex raids in that battalion, in the Death Riders battalion, you've got movement 16 basic troops that fly. So
actually, that's a really good call out. So that actually you may not even need to use the underworlds, because you put down, I think Ash, you called that right at the start. Some of those deployment maps are only 15 inches between the two. No, not 15. 18 between the two. The deployment zones are 15. So all of a sudden you've got your high movement dudes +3 to the move. Throw down cogs, it's another +2. So I'm guessing your movement could be anywhere between 10 to 14 on average.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary. I mean, we've talked about the sustainability and the durability of your troops. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, it's good for flooding the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Throw down all those chain rasps or your Grimmies and really just own the board with the speed. You could get a lot of victory points that lead very, very easily.
Yeah, the only other one here that I'd probably call out from these from the relics of the underworld would be the Midnight Tome. So this one's useful because it makes your bearer a wizard, knows the Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, and gets a spell from the Lore of the Underworlds. So that's pretty good. Having extra spells is always handy, especially if you've kind of filled out your hero slots with non-wizard heroes. I've seen this used quite a few times on the Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed, just because he's a good point sink. So you want to be able to make as much use out of him as you can. So putting that, getting him to be a wizard as well is quite useful.
So is it better to make a non-wizard a wizard, or because the other part is that if the model is already a wizard, they get an additional spell, so you can get a double caster in your list?
I think that's less good because you're better off spreading thin your casters across the board than trying to get a double caster, because none of our casters that can take this artifact have any pluses to their cast ability. So you're not getting a reliable caster with 2 casts. You're just getting a caster with 2 casts, or 2 casters with 2 casts. So you're better off splitting it up, I think.
Yeah. We've sort of mentioned how fragile the characters are. You kind of want all the characters to have an equal amount of sort of ability in the game, so that they have to kind of pick and choose which one they kill. If one of them's obviously the best, they're just going to kill that one.
Yeah, they'll be a target. I think the final artifacts you have access to is your Infernal Lantern. So you've got 3 lanterns to choose from. You've got the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon. You've got the Witch Light Lantern, and then the Beacon of Nagashazar, which I think Ash you had mentioned earlier. But Nick, any of these 3 lanterns really stand out to you, or is it the Beacon?
No, for me it's the Light Shard. So I kind of mentioned that before. Was the Light Shard is once per battle at the start of the combat phase. The bearer can use the artifact. If they do, you can reroll failed hit rolls for attacks made by friendly Nighthaunt units that are wholly within 12 of the bearer when they attack in that combat phase. So this is where if you've got a big unit of Chain Rasp, or if one of your if your Spirit Torment's been killed, or if you've got, Kurdos or Lantian and you want him to re-roll, or even if a coach, just anything, it's flexible. It's just you can just pop it, and for that one turn, all your attacks are re-rolling to hit, which this is what you would take if you're going to use lots of Spirit Hosts. You'd have to have this.
Yeah.
So for me, the issue with the Beacon is you have to successfully cast Spectral Lore, and you generally don't have any positives to cast. So for me, the Light Shard's a guarantee. You get it once per game, and it can have a huge difference. It can really buff the amount of damage you do.
And I guess with Spectral Lore as well, it's one of those ones that people will save their unbind for to attempt to get rid of that. So I'm hearing a bit more consistency from the Light Shard.
Yeah, for sure.
But Ash, you were mentioning the Beacon.
Yeah, I was just mentioning it in combination with that Chain Guard Battalion, if you wanted to go that way to get the extra healing into that one unit that you've started to lose some models out of. But I think Nick's right. I think the guarantee that you get from the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon, probably the better way to go around with that one. I guess they kind of work. Probably I would take the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon in the Chain Guard because it makes up for the lack that battalion has in the rerolls. But if I was going to take the Condemned, I'd probably go with the Beacon of Nagashazar because you've already got rerolls from that battalion. So then getting the extra models back is more useful.
Yeah. Is there any artifacts from Malign Sorcery that really work for you guys? I know you mentioned the Griff Feather Charm in the past. You've said the Aether Quartz Brooch to get some additional command points. Is there any other artifacts? No doubt the Ethereal Amulet is something that you're not going to be rushing to go get anytime soon.
Not so much.
Oh, it helps against, is it Drackfoot?
Yeah.
Does it?
That would just be the most insidious thing to do. Just be like, yeah, I've got the Ethereal Amulet just for you.
They stuffed up with the wording on Dragonfoot.
Yeah.
The Ethereal Amulet doesn't actually give you the Ethereal special rule.
Yeah.
It cannot be modified. And so Dragonfoot specifically hits the Ethereal special rule. So it's just targeting Nighthaunt and not targeting Vampire Lords on zombie dragons.
No,
there's a big issue here. Like,
a little bit racist.
Priorities.
Yeah. Other artifacts that I've seen used, if you do go the Execution Horde route, you can put the if you do it, you can put the Sword of Judgment onto the leader of the Execution Horde, onto the Executioner, and because he gets a natural +1 from that battalion. And then you can also, I think there's another way that you can give him a +1, so you can potentially get his attacks doing the mortal wounds on 4s or more, which isn't bad, but it's not good because it's also got all of those spirit hosts in the battalion in there, which is pretty useless.
I think it's still bad. Like,
yeah.
Nick muted himself for a second so he could weep.
If you want to take something bad and then like go double down on it being bad, then feel free. But yeah.
Generally, I don't take the artifacts from the realms because I've always got the Pendant of the Fellwind in my list, and I will generally take one of the other artifacts, whether it's the Light Shard of the Harvest Moon or the Slitter or sometimes I will do Griff Feather Charm, but yeah, that's kind of the ones that I'll be picking between in general.
Yeah, for me, pick one is always the Pendant of the Fellwind. Pick two is generally either the Lantern, or the Aether Quartz Brooch, because Nighthaunt can get pretty command point hungry.
Especially if you're not taking it. Was it Reichner that gets can steal the command points?
Kurdos.
So if you're not taking Kurdos, you could obviously, I mean, even if you are taking Kurdos, you could get a lot of command points quickly.
Yep. Is the command point thing in Legions a item, or is it a command trait?
In Legion of Grief, it's a command trait, I believe. Yeah.
So there's an ability in Legion of Grief to, I think we mentioned it before, it's like Vassal of the Craven King or something. It lets you, it's an Eighth Quartz Brooch again.
Yeah.
So you can actually so every time you use a command point, you get 2 rolls at 5 up and getting 1 back. So you can actually hit it twice and profit.
Massive.
So yeah, that's a very cool effect, is combining those 2 things.
As someone as a Gloomspike Gits player that would often end on 10 to 12 command points, there's only so much you can use them on, but it sounds like you've got a lot more use than I do.
Just use them on reroll charges, every single charge. If you don't make a 10, just reroll.
Charge 6s to run. You got a lot of uses. My grots were useless as hell in that space. Hopefully what's not useless is the endless spells. I think that's the last piece of customization we haven't talked about. So is there anything from Malign Sorcery or Forbidden Power that that you think work well in this list, Nick?
Look, I think Geminids is great, but Geminids is great in every army. I don't know if it's more great in Nighthaunt than it is elsewhere. We talked a little bit about Cogs. Again, it's kind of great in a lot of lists, but Cogs is cool if you want to do a list that drops down or sort of comes up from the underworld and just rolls for those charges.
I imagine you're mostly using the speed up time as opposed to the slowing down of time to get that extra cast.
Yeah. So you could...
I would say as well, though, if you need to keep your heroes alive, getting the slowdown time on a Lady Alinda for a 4-up Ethereal Save re-rolling is pretty strong there.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Cogs and Death Riders is good because you've got +1 to charge naturally, so you're charging on +3 when you come up. So you're hitting 6-inch charges with rerolls from the underworld. It's pretty strong.
I imagine Cogs slowing down time in a Legion of Grief wouldn't be bad too, because you could have your hero slowing down time if it's your general, sitting back next to a grave site, so bringing them back with the CP and the additional spell. So that could work.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about the Nighthaunt endless spells, Dash?
No, we don't want to talk about them. So the other one that I would talk about is the Shackles. I'll put them in my list for the board control. And the other one that I think is good in Nighthaunt, because we've got if you're going to take I've just lost his name now, the Ragnar the Grimhailer, because you can get that bonus to casting some of the endless spells that are more on the 8 to 9 casting level, are the ones that you can sort of take advantage of. So Purple Sun.
I was going to ask you about Purple Sun. So Ash made Purple Sun quite famous at 100 points when it was pre-General's Handbook reduction.
Just take it.
It's so good. I'll take 2.
Why don't we like the Nighthaunt endless spells? So let's acknowledge them. They do exist. Unlike the Cities of Sigmar that doesn't get any extra stuff, you got some. Why don't you like them? And this is for either of you. I don't mind who answers this one.
Well, we can break it down one by one if you like, I guess.
You're making me work.
So the best one out of the 3. Just whilst I get them up now.
So you've got the Vault, you've got the Reaper, and then you've got the what does that say? I'm trying to squint.
The Reaper's easy. The Reaper's a crap Aether Void Pendulum.
Pendulum. Just do that.
So Aether Void Pendulum a lot of people take. So why was this one crap?
It's just objectively worse. So it does. It can change direction, sure, but it what does it do damage-wise? After this model moves, roll a dice for each model that it moved over. If the roll is equal to or greater than the model's save characteristic, that model as unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So it doesn't hit a whole unit; it just hits like a couple models because it's not that big.
It doesn't move far enough to get across many models.
Yeah, let's say it's moving over 5 models, and they've got a 3-up save. And that's probably the best case scenario. You're getting 3 mortal wounds out of it.
Yeah.
Like, whereas on average, you're getting D6 out of a pendulum, and it's probably hitting multiple units, and it's probably hitting them again the next turn if you're in the second turn.
And that's the thing, because this one can turn around and come back at you, anything that does mortal wounds is terrible for this army because it's going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt your opponent.
So it's got flexibility, but it sounds like the pendulum is a much better choice if you're going to go down that route.
The one that I would say that's probably the best out of the options, even though it is the most expensive out of them as well, is the Vault of Souls. Although, actually, I think it came down in points, didn't it?
No,
it's pretty cheap now. Hang on, I've got it here.
It's pretty cheap. I think he's 20 points.
No, that's not the most expensive. Your most expensive is the other one.
Okay. But yeah, the Vault of Souls is pretty good.
Sorry,
the Vault of Souls is 20 points. The Reaper is 20 points, and then your other one is 60 points.
The Mortis Terminexus thing.
Yeah.
So Vault of Souls is pretty good for 20 points. So after this model is set up or moved, you roll a dice for each model within 6 inches of it. And on a 6+, that model's unit suffers a mortal wound. So you've got a little bit of Horde chip damage there, which won't necessarily come back and hurt you too much. It's kind of good because you can, when you start to keep track of the mortal wounds that it does, it sort of builds up and then explodes. And that does D6 mortal wounds to all the units that are within 6 inches of it. So if you can start to chip away at things and build it up, and then get it into your opponent's army, and then it blows up and does D6 mortal wounds for 20 points, it's not too bad. And it's a relatively easy to cast one as well. So only cast on a 6. So that one's okay for 20 points. Is it better than just having a chance at a triumph? Probably not.
Yeah, I was say, is it better than just 20 points?
Yeah.
I mean, first off, you're assuming that most people remember they can have a triumph.
True.
And you'd have to remember that you've got this in your army because it's junk.
All right,
but not as junk as the other one, which for the same reason. So it's the Mortalis Terminexus. This is 60 points, which is just ludicrous. Which
is a command point as well, or it could be another endless spell.
The model's sick. I love the model. Don't get me wrong. But so you set it up. It's predatory move 8. You can choose to reverse time, which heals D3 wounds allocated to each unit within 6, or you can hasten time, which does D3 mortal wounds to each unit within 6. So it's awful because it's only healing wounds, so it's not actually summoning back models, which is most of what you want to do. And if your opponent gets to control it, it's doing mortal wounds to you potentially, which is awful. And it's not even doing that many mortals to units. It's doing D3. So for 60 points, you've got to cast it, and it's probably just going to be shit. So
you cast it, and so you've got 2 ways of playing it. You play it to try and heal your own heroes up. So you're surrounding your heroes around this model, and then if your opponent gets the control, you lose those heroes. Or you play it trying to be aggressive, send it forwards, but then you've done a little bit of chip damage to your enemy heroes. They get control of it. They heal them back up with it as well. So
it's awful.
It's just bad.
Yeah, fair enough. Anything else you guys want to talk about from an endless spell point of view?
I think that's pretty much it from my point of view.
Cool. I'm just going to ask what... Sorry, Nick?
Yeah, you don't really want like Soulstrain Bridge or anything like that from Forbidden Power because while you do want to cross the table, it actually probably is slower to do it through that than just walking, and you don't have the shooting that you want. That
you could do the Shards of Valagar if you want to really combo into that halving movement situation, but it's a relatively short cast for the first turn. You're really relying on that for the second turn when it flips over.
All right. And before I transition, I've got to ask Ash, does your black coach like the purple sun?
No. It doesn't hate it. Thanks, Mike. Yeah. It did in one game against Michael, the last game of CanCon this year. I summoned my purple sun, sat it next to my black coach, and I was like, oh, it's one dice. He's got to roll a 6, and then he's got to roll high on the damage. And of course, he rolls the 6, and then he gets 9 mortal wounds through on it. So, yeah, that hurt.
Still wasn't enough for second place.
That's all right. That's all right. I think 2 years ago, Michael Thompson deleted 40 swordsmen in turn 1, game 1 of CanCon with Arcane the Black. So him and spells, something shifty about him and spells. We've kind of built our list now. We've customized it, and I guess I want to tap into some of the experience you have and ask you a couple of questions, mostly around how do I get the most out of them. So I guess what I want to hear from you guys is what tactics, tips, advice, if I'm a new player getting into this, if I'm someone who wants to get better at a tournament, what have you learnt along the way that could help me become a good Nighthaunt player? So, Nick, I'll throw over the first one to you. What's your first piece of advice for me, either as a new or an experienced player?
There's about a million different ways to accidentally move stuff out of like wholly within range. And it's an absolute nightmare. And you need to practice it. You need to always keep in mind, okay, I need to be wholly within 12 for the 6-up save. I need to be wholly within 12 for the +1 to wound with the Guardian of Souls. I need to be wholly within 12 for the rerolls to hit from the Spirit Torment. I got to be wholly within, I think it's 24 for the +1 attack on the Night of Shrouds. All of this stuff is wholly within 12. Some of this stuff happens in the hero phase. So if you summon something and you place a summon model outside of wholly within 12, well, then your next summoning thing that needs to be wholly within 12 or your next effect that needs to be wholly within 12, suddenly that's gone. You can't use it. So that spell that you wanted to cast on them, you can't use it because you've summoned a model and you put it outside of 12. If you pile in out of 12, you lose the rerolls to hit. If you roll a 10 on the charge and you go hooning forward up the board with your big unit, suddenly you've lost your save, you've lost all your debuffs. Sure, you're attacking twice, but you're dead. So there's so many things in the book that rely on this wholly within rule, and it's so easy to just place one model out or something like that, and it's bad. It's a bad time, and yeah, it's a really quick way to come unstuck with Nighthaunt is to accidentally raise that model outside of 12 or something like that.
So what could I do to avoid that? So do you have any advice?
Measure it and just know your rules and just constantly be measuring that 12 inches. When you pile in, have a 12-inch, acrylic stick or something like that. Whack that down when you do your pile in so you don't pile in outside of 12. Sometimes you're going to sacrifice attacks. You're going to go, okay, these 2 blade guys aren't going to attack. I'm going to lose 8 attacks here. But every single attack every other blade guys with 4 attacks will be rerolling to hit. So it's not worth 8 extra attacks when, your other, 32 get to reroll to hit. So, yeah, it's just about making sure you know what's where at all times, where your characters are, where they're going to be, because sometimes you've got to predict where your unit's going to be charging into combat, and you've got to get your character further up, and you've got to know, okay, this is where I want the unit to be, so this is where the character needs to be, and because the characters often don't charge. So the issue is if you move the character up at the same speed as the unit and then the unit charges, the unit's now going to be further away from the character. So sometimes you've got to run the character, have it in front of the unit, and then hit that charge. You bug it if you miss the charge, but that's just the Nighthaunt life, basically. So yeah, it's just consistently measuring it, always knowing what's where, what needs to be in which range, and just not forgetting it, because if you forget, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I have played a few opponents where have realized that if they make X move, they would be out of range, and at least they've had that decision as opposed to doing it without knowing and then having this I gotcha moment that I was trying to set up an attack. I've now moved out of the buff range because I didn't do something with, I don't know, my hero, I didn't run him. It's now, foiled my entire plan. So knowing those numbers, that acrylic token, or, measuring out, there's been times where I've used dice to kind of keep buff ranges and making sure that I don't move anything, out of a certain bubble. That's a really good call out, because I'm seeing a lot of buff ranges, and there's a lot of different numbers in Nighthaunt. It's not just a consistent 6 or 12. It is, you've got 18, 24, 12, 6, 15, 9.
Yeah. And for the most, and we've talked about this army being this army that can be hyper quick and really good in the movement phase. And a lot of the time, you are going to want to start very compact and very everything sort of as a group to keep within that buff range. And then sort of towards the end of the game is when you're going to split everything off, when you don't need the combat buffs, when you don't need to fight the combats, when you want to just jump on the objectives. That's when you got to jump, sort of spread everything out. But you've got to time that right. You've got to have that pre-planned. So Nighthaunt, a very technically difficult army to play. The positioning of your models is hugely important. Because if you stuff it up, something gets into your characters are dead, or you get too far away from your character. So yeah, technically a very difficult army to play, but a rewarding one at the same time, because when you do play them well and you do play that right, you do get those buffs and some of the units become terrifying.
Yeah, it's not, what I've noticed is that it's not Iron Jaws. It's not just getting in there and smashing someone in the face. This, you're not hitting someone with a hammer. You're cutting them with a scalpel, and there's a lot of precision that's involved in this army.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing I'd say as well, definitely, obviously keeping your Holy Withins in range, but be aware of 9-inch ranges as well. So because you have that ability to set things up in the underworld and teleport your Dribbly Harrow to bring units nearby, be aware of where your opponent's leaving 9-inch gaps that you can take advantage of, and consider them before you show your hand and show where they're going to be. So something that I've found that I've gotten quite good at is using things like, if you're playing on one of the rubber battle boards, that they're 24 inches wide. So you can use that as a guide to get an idea of where the 9-inch marker would be. And that's really useful for being able to control your impact when you go in to do those 9-inch deployments. So I'd say take special note of that, and also be prepared to make trades in this army. You're not going to keep your entire army alive for the entire game, and sometimes it will be a matter of throwing away a 5-man unit of Hex Wraiths so that you can keep 10 Chain Rasps on the objective behind them. It might be putting the Black Coach in the way of your Grimghast Reapers because you need more models than your opponent on the objective as well. So you need to know how to make those trades work for you in each different scenario.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I would agree with that. If I buy the New Games Workshop, is it the Battlefield box? Any advice to me as a new player? So we've talked a bit about the buff ranges. I'm going to do a quick shout out here and talk about AOS Reminders, which is a free website that allows you to put all your rules in a format that automatically puts it by the different phases. And, if it has to happen at the start, it'll put it at the start, at the end. So it sounds like there's a lot of synergy and a lot of rules. So that could very much help you just learn the game and learn your army in a real time.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Are these guys easy to transport? Like, are they fiddly? Is there something that I should consider with transporting them around?
Lots of foam on a Magna Rack, or I don't know. They're finicky as. There was a lot of rumors about that, like Nighthaunt with the answer to Chinese recasters, because you just know where you're recasting those models. They are so thin and so finicky, and they break. Actually, here's a good tip. Get some metal washers and put them underneath your Grimghast Reapers and your Bladegeist Revenants, because those models are so top heavy and they fall over, and you hook you'll hook on the Reaper sights that stick up in the air, and you'll knock one over, and they're an absolute effing nightmare to have on the board. And the best thing I ever did was put a decent size metal washer on the bottom of the boat.
Under the base. If you ever play in the old Realm of Battle boards as well that have like the inbuilt hills, they just never stand. It's just an absolute frustrating process. So that's a really good call out. Those washers are like literally like 10 cents. They're worth nothing. Little bit of super glue there. By magnet, can transport them as well, which is pretty cool. But even just the consistency on the table, good choice.
For sure. I guess you did ask the question if someone was going to get that Nighthaunt Battle Force box for Christmas and how they would play around that. So I've just had a quick look at it now, and it's got a good variety of units in there. So you get a couple of, I think you get 10 Blade Geist Revenants, you get 10 Grimgast Reapers, you get 10 Chain Rasps, you get 10 Dreadscythe Harridans, 5 Hex Raids, and Kurdos, the Craven King. So I think it's a good start to an MSU style Nighthaunt army, or it's a good start to building up some of those units into a Legion of Grief army if you wanted to take it in that route. I think, yeah, if I was looking at picking up that one, I think you'd look around playing with the Aether Quartz Brooch in the Legion of Grief with Kurdos with his ability and the Vassal of the Craven King, and probably boost up some of those units into larger squads to make the most out of the Legion of Grief abilities.
Excellent, thank you. Any other experience, tips, hints, tricks, things that you guys have added almost 3 hours of incredible value and insights already. So thank you both very much. But is there anything else from your gaming experience or things that maybe you've just realized in this moment of truth?
No, I think that's got me covered pretty much.
I've depleted the well.
Yeah, I think we've covered it pretty well. They're an interesting army to play, but you got to practice them. You got to play lots of games.
Yeah,
we have.
Them as well.
Look, I think we've uncovered them incredibly well, considering literally the new battalions have just dropped, like literally this week. Pardon?
How good was the timing on that?
Couldn't have asked for it any better. People have been harassing me about when's Nighthaunt. I asked you guys, and they're like, no, Masters is coming up. We'll have to wait after the Masters. Literally couldn't have asked for it any better timing. So we've got new battalions. We've talked about Legion of Grief and talked about and highlighted some of the choices that you'd make if you'd go down the Legion of Grief path. Alternatively, if you're going down the Nighthaunt path and all the different options that you have under the battalions. We've given you guys some really cool artifacts and command traits and spells and things to consider. And I think the thing that I'm hearing the most is I see this book a little bit like the Cities of Sigmar. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of flexibility in this army, and you can play around a certain battalion, and then you can play a completely different battalion, and the army feels different. Where, Daughters of Cain, witch elves are witch elves. Like, no matter where you put them in what temple, they're witch elves. So this looks like a book that will reward you for a long time. So very cool. And maybe one day, Nick, you can get your Miamon Banshees back out, all 24 of them.
Maybe indeed.
Wouldn't that be a sight? All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up here. Any shout outs if people want to talk to you guys more and kind of, get your insights, or they love what you've talked about? I do have Twitter handles in the description for this episode, so definitely jump on both of the Twitters and follow these two fine gentlemen. Nick, if they want to hear your radio smooth voice, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I do regularly do the Dwellers Below podcast, so we've been doing that for a while. So head over to thedwellersbelow.net or the Dwellers Below on Podbean. We're pretty active on Twitter. Lots of different people have access to that Twitter, so the content varies. But the Dwellers Cast on Twitter and on Facebook. And if you're interested I will shout out my event because we've just started selling tickets. So if you're interested in narrative gaming, we're actually running a narrative 2-day event in May this year in Melbourne. It's going to be awesome. I'm super hyped. I've never run a narrative event, but I've always wanted to, and we've got a really good lead up time. We're going to do some awesome tables. It's going to be the venue's great. I think it's going to be an awesome event, and there are still tickets available. So we've sold, I think, 31 tickets of the 40. So there's still a few tickets there if you want to get in. Ash, I know you're coming. Coach, I know you're thinking about it. Come on, smash that purchase button, get your ticket, because it's going to be awesome. There's a big, strong sort of Sydney contingent coming down. Randy's coming up from Tassie. We all love Randy. Everyone loves Randy.
We love the Randy man. I'm coming to America in about a month after that, so I'm balancing South Australia GT, and then, but we'll see.
Yeah, I've got a ticket to Sagi T as well, so I'm looking forward to that one.
Sounds like a good opportunity for a tour for me. If you do Sagi T, you could go to Dwellers, then you can go over the US. You've got it all lined up in a row there.
Yeah, I just need those Patreon sweet content creator dollars. Like I'm just like Rob Symes, just absolutely rolling it in Coach HQ. I'm sitting actually on a pot of money.
It helps when you get those kickbacks from the Rage of Sigmar conglomerate as well, doesn't it?
So just start a Kickstarter. That's what Clint does.
Go fund me.
Do a Rage of Sigmar style world tour, except don't have like a baby and not do it.
Or a dissertation like Tom. But go check out the Dwellers Below. Awesome. Follow them on Twitch. They might stream again one day. Check out the podcast. Check out the blog. Go follow them on Twitter. Ash, you are an absolute hobby legend. Where can they find you?
You can find me at your friendly local gaming store at Warhammer Chatswood. But otherwise, if you're looking to find me, basically on Twitter is where you can chat to me. I'm always keen for a chat about Nighthaunt or any other topic. If you've got any questions, always happy to talk things through as well.
Awesome. My audience is like 40% American, so I'm sure they'll come down to Games Workshop Chatswood and come chat to you.
That would be great.
All right, well, you guys know where to find me, AOS Coach, or follow, like, do the stuff. Follow me, crush it. Obviously, do plenty of stuff like this, and you can follow me on Twitter as well. Handles in the show description. Ash, Nick, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for downloading 3 hours of absolute value to Nighthaunt. I'm glad we got this off the list, but more importantly, I'm glad you guys added incredible insight on how we can bring this faction back to life. I know there's some people who are really looking to get the most out of it, and I think with the new battle boxes, with the new the battalions, you have so much diversity. I think there's a lot of ideas to consider for your next event. So Ash, Nick, thank you for your time. We're going to wrap up. Get back in there and roll lots more sixes. Thank you again. Chat to you guys soon.
Cheers,
When
guys.
do we talk about Warriors of Chaos?